Muito bom dia, pessoal, sejam bem-vindos. Hoje é mais uma transmissão em nosso canal, o PTV. Hoje, 12 de março de 2024, pelo horário de Brasília, são 5 horas e 25 minutos. E hoje, então, vamos acompanhar o retorno e o splashdown, então, da CREW-7, né, que vai ser realizado, então, no Golfo do México hoje, tá? Bom dia, pessoal, sejam bem-vindos. Hoje mais uma Deixa eu ajustar aqui. Pronto. Então hoje o Splashdown, né, será realizado então lá no Golfo do México, né, onde a tripulação da CREW-7 então irá fazer o seu retorno, né, dentro de instantes. E também aí o Splashdown está previsto para acontecer por volta das 6h50 da manhã pelo horário de Brasília. Ontem então tivemos então o momento da saída da Estação Espacial Internacional, né, pela parte da manhã, mas não tivemos imagens, né, do momento da sua saída da Estação Espacial Internacional. Mas aconteceu por volta da 12h20, no horário de Brasília ontem, né, a saída da tripulação da CREW-7. E hoje, então, teremos então o Splashdown, né? Então, depois de 6 meses em órbita, a tripulação da CREW-7 retorna à Terra. Lembrando que logo mais, a partir das 10h25 da manhã, teremos missão com a Rocket Lab, diretamente da Nova Zelândia. E à noite, teremos a nova tentativa para o lançamento da CREW-7, né, que era para ter sido ontem, mas foi adiado para hoje. Então, hoje, a partir das 10h30 da noite, teremos então a nova tentativa para o lançamento da CREW-7, aí da Spacex. Em instantes, então, vamos entrar em contato juntamente com a Spacex, NASA, aí para então acompanharmos o retorno e o splashdown aí da CREW-7. Você está então no canal UPTV, acompanhando então tudo que acontece ao redor do mundo. Você vê só aqui. Por falar então ao redor do mundo, né? Hoje também tivemos o quarto lançamento lá na Suécia, né, pela missão Rexus 32. Então, depois da transmissão aqui, eu vou colocar tudo direitinho em ordem para vocês, tá? O que aconteceu lá na Suécia. E já estamos também chegando no 1.300 inscritos no canal, aqui no YouTube. Muito obrigado então aí a todos pela companhia, né, de sempre aqui nas transmissões, e também nos vídeos aí na parte de matemática e programação em Python. Então, mais uma vez, meu nome é William Pessoa e você está ao vivo, então, aí acompanhando este momento então do retorno e o splashdown aí da tripulação da CREW-7. O splashdown está previsto para acontecer às 6h50 da manhã, aí lá no Golfo do México hoje. Tá? Hoje não será na Flórida, mas será então lá no Golfo do México, como eu anunciei ontem lá no X. Estamos aguardando então contato com o pessoal lá da Califórnia. Lembrando que essa transmissão então está em conjunto com a NASA e SpaceX. Lembrando que no dia 13 então teremos aí mais uma missão Starlink do grupo 644. E dia 14 também teremos aí o lançamento então para o teste de voo integrado do Starship. E já estamos ao vivo então com a nossa transmissão sendo iniciada com a NASA. Agora 5 horas e 30 minutos pelo horário de Brasília. Missão agora, conjunto com a NASA, sendo iniciada nesse momento. E aí, portanto, estamos iniciando a nossa transmissão em conjunto com a NASA e Spacex. Neste momento, mais uma vez.
Spacex CREW-7 mission as they return to Earth.
Aí, então, estamos aí acompanhando o momento então do retorno à Terra pela tripulação então aí da CREW-7. Então aí a tripulação da CREW-7, né, que está a bordo então da Dragon Endurance.
Satoshi Furukawa and Roscosmos cosmonaut Konstantin Borisov. Currently, they're on their way to the targeted Splashdown site just off the coast of
Pela
Pensacola,
Astronauta da NASA, Jasmin
Moghbeli,
da ESA, Andreas Mogensen, da JAXA, Satoshi, Furukawa e da Rússia, Konstantin,
Upon
Borisov.
departing the International Space Station, Dragon underwent a sequence of departure burns. The crew also had a rest period and has since kicked off
Lembrando que
preparations
ontem
for
então aí
re-entry,
tivemos
including getting in their
a
launch and
liberação
re-entry
então aí da
spacesuits
Dragon
and successfully
Endurance
performing a leak check on
da
those suits.
Estação Espacial
This
Internacional,
next phase of the mission
2020,
is when things
né, pelo
will
horário
really
de
start to
Brasília.
amp up, and
E
Dragon
agora
has a
então,
series
na
of
parte da
steps to
manhã,
complete before returning
vamos
CREW-7 home.
acompanhar então o momento
First,
do
Dragon will
retorno
maneuver to
e
the
o
correct
Splashdown.
attitude and jettison its trunk, which is the cylindrical, unpressurized part of the spacecraft. The trunk is currently connected to the aft or the bottom section of the Dragon capsule, and that's where the heat shield is located. So, in order to expose that heat shield and get the vehicle ready for atmospheric re-entry, we're going to jettison that trunk.
And from there, the spacecraft will use its forward thrusters to perform a deorbit burn, which will put Dragon on a trajectory to return to Earth. This burn will last about 14 minutes once it starts. The deorbit burn uses Draco thrusters on Dragon, primarily the four located on the forward bulkhead, and is executed at the apogee, or the highest point of Dragon's current orbit around the Earth. This will alter Dragon's path to ultimately line it up to re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down off the coast of Florida. Splashdown is planned for 2:47 a.m. Pacific, 5:47 a.m. Eastern this morning, again off the coast of Pensacola, Florida.
It's all going to go pretty quickly, but before we go any further, let's take a minute to meet our crew.
First up is Lieutenant Colonel Jasmin Moghbeli,
E aí,
who
novamente,
hails
então, a
from Baldwin,
apresentação
New
da
York, and
tripulação
earned a
para
bachelor's
vocês.
degree in
É
aerospace
Jasmin
engineering
Moghbeli,
from the
nossa
Massachusetts
comandante então de
Institute of
hoje.
Technology, and a master's degree in aerospace engineering from the Naval Postgraduate School. She also graduated with honors from the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School as an AH-1W Super Cobra pilot and
Né, então,
Marine Corps
lembrando que a
test
tripulação
pilot.
da
She has
CREW-7,
flown
né, vai
more than
fazer o pouso,
150 combat
né, o toque
missions.
na água
In
e na
all, she
costa da
accrued
Flórida, mas
2,000 hours
pelo
of
lado
flight
do
time
Golfo do
in more than
México.
25 aircraft. At the time of her selection as an astronaut, Moghbeli was testing H-1 helicopters and serving as the quality assurance and avionics officer for VMX-1. She is also the proud mom of twin girls. With this mission, she will have logged an estimated 199 days in space during her first space flight, including 6 hours and 42 minutes during a spacewalk. And today, she is the commander of CREW-7.
Sitting next to
E aí,
Jasmin is
nosso
pilot
piloto,
Andreas
Mogensen.
Mogensen. This is Mogensen's second trip to the space station. His first was as the flight engineer for the ESA IRIS mission in 2015.
Lembrando também que no dia 21 vamos ter aí a Soyuz MS-25,
the Copenhagen
a
International
nova missão
School,
tripulada
a
então aí
master's
pelo
degree
lado
in
russo,
aeronautical engineering from
para a
Imperial
Estação
College
Espacial
London,
Internacional.
and a doctorate in aerospace engineering from the University of Texas
Dia
at
21.
Austin. In 2015, Mogensen became the first Danish person to go to space and currently is serving as the European Astronaut Liaison Officer to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. With this mission, he will have logged 209 days in space across 2 flights.
And before we jump into this next one, you might hear some banging
E aí,
behind
nosso
us.
primeiro
This
especialista
is
da
a working
missão,
facility,
Satoshi
as you may know,
Furukawa, da
open 24
JAXA.
hours a day working to build rockets. So if you do hear that, that is some of what you might be hearing in the background.
Esse
So next
barulho que
up in
vocês
the role
estão
of mission
ouvindo, né?
specialist is
Pra quem não
Japan
sabe, ela
Aerospace
da
Exploration Agency
própria
astronaut Satoshi Furukawa. Furukawa's
fábrica lá
interest in
da
space began when he
Spacex,
was
né?
5 years old and saw the Apollo 11 moon
Califórnia.
landing on TV. He was also a fan of the Japanese TV space hero Ultra 7. His professional career began as a medical doctor, but after seeing a news
Lembrando
report
que às
about
10h25
Japan
da manhã
auditioning for
teremos
new
missão
astronauts to do
All the
science
Night Long
experiments on the space
Rocket
station,
Lab.
he decided to apply. He was selected by the National Space Development Agency of Japan to be an astronaut candidate in 1999. His first mission to the International Space Station was as a flight engineer for Expedition 28 and 29 that launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in June 2011. Following this mission, he will have logged 366 days in space across his 2 trips to space.
And to round it all out, mission specialist Konstantin Borisov was selected to be a cosmonaut in 2018,
E aí,
and
nosso
this was
segundo
his first trip
especialista
to
da
space.
missão,
He has a
Konstantin
Bachelor of Economics
Borisov.
from the Russian
Da
Academy of
Borisov.
Economics, a Master of Science in Operations Research and Systems Analysis from Warwick University in Coventry, UK, and a Master in Aircraft Life Support Systems from the Moscow Aviation Institute. He's worked for companies such as Volvo and
Lembrando
the
então que o
Boston
Splashdown está
Consulting Group.
previsto para
He is also
acontecer
an
às
experienced
6h50
freediving
da manhã,
instructor and an international
ali
freediving
na
judge.
costa da
He
Flórida,
will end this mission
mas
logging
no lado
199
então
days
do
in
Golfo do
space.
México.
Now, to prepare for upcoming events, the Dragon spacecraft is currently doing a couple of things autonomously, meaning automatically. It's isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep Dragon, the internal temperature of Dragon comfortable for Jasmin, Andy, Satoshi, and Konstantin during reentry. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism, which will terminate all the data, the power, and the fluid connections between the capsule and the trunk. As I mentioned earlier, at the base
Então
of the
estamos
vehicle is where
iniciando
that
aí a
heat shield is
separação
located, and that's
das
where the trunk
comunicações,
is
né,
currently
e
connected.
também
So
aí
we're
da
going to
parte,
jettison
né,
that
que
trunk
liga,
in order
né, os
to prepare the
mecanismos aí
vehicle for
da parte
reentry,
de trás então
as
da
that heat
Dragon, né,
shield
da
is a
cápsula
critical
Dragon,
component of that
né,
reentry,
que liga
given the
então
fact
aí
that it's
a,
going to be
como se fosse entre
reentering through
aspas,
the
né,
atmosphere. The
o
atmosphere is going to be doing a
porta-malas,
ton of that work, creating lots of
né,
heat
da
and friction, and
Dragon,
helping to slow the
né,
vehicle
onde fica
down
então
using
toda a
that heat
parte aí
shield.
dos
So we
sistemas
want to get the trunk
de
out of the way
comunicação,
and separate
combustível,
it from the capsule.
né, ali da Dragon, né, o trunk.
We'll be sure to bring you live views of the vehicle whenever we have
ter
them.
também aquela parte
Unfortunately,
onde
due
fica
to
o
ground
painel
station
solar da
coverage,
Dragon.
we don't always have those beautiful views of the capsule or of the crew inside the capsule, but as soon as we have them, we will be sure to bring them to you. On your screen now is a live view of
Agora
SpaceX mission
5 horas
control
e
here,
38
actually
minutos
just over to the side of us.
pelo horário de
And that
Brasília.
is where Dragon operators are stationed on console, monitoring and observing the crew and the
Então
vehicle
estamos
to
acompanhando
ensure
então
that
o momento do
everything is
retorno
going as planned. As I said, Dragon is doing
tripulação
several
então da
things
CREW-7.
autonomously, and these operators are monitoring those systems and those checkouts. So let's talk a little bit about the flight history of Dragon. So the development of Dragon for crew started with the Dragon cargo spacecraft. Dragon was designed from the beginning for flying humans to space, so much so that even the first Dragon, like the one just behind us, had a window. Before we could fly humans, our teams implemented a number of design upgrades to make sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 were suitable for flying people,
Estamos
and
então
then put
aguardando
both
imagens
vehicles through
internas da
thousands of
Dragon
tests to
Endurance.
prove their safety. Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit and beyond. It is the only spacecraft currently flying that is capable of returning significant amounts of cargo to Earth and is the first private spacecraft to take humans to the space station. Dragon is fully autonomous, which means that it can basically fly itself. But it also features full manual override capabilities just in case of an emergency. So taking a closer look at it, there you can see an animation. It stands at almost 27 feet tall from the bottom of the trunk to the top of the nose cone, and it's composed of two main elements: the capsule, which is designed to hold crew and pressurized
Então, como
cargo,
estamos vendo aí
which is the
no
top
infográfico
half,
aí
and then
da
the trunk, which is
SpaceX,
the
né? Então, é
unpressurized
aquela
section
parte que vocês
there
estão
at
vendo
the
embaixo
bottom
da
half.
cápsula
The
Dragon, né?
nose
Então, é a
cone at the
parte do
very top
trunk,
of the
né?
capsule
Como eles
protects
chamam,
the docking system
né?
and also
Tem
the
a parte
guidance
dos
navigation
sistemas
control
e
system.
da
The nose cone opens for docking and
combustível
remains
também da
attached to
Dragon, né?
Dragon, unlike the previous
E a
version
parte
of
também fica o
Dragon,
painel solar.
and
Então,
that
essa
helps
parte
towards
daqui a
our
pouco então será
reusability
liberada
efforts. So right
em
now, that nose
instantes,
cone is actually
né?
open,
Para que apenas só fique
as we have not yet
a
closed
parte,
it
como
in
eles chamam,
preparation
do
for
vaso, né?
the
Onde é a cápsula Dragon.
capsule reentry.
Fica
Dragon
então a
has
parte
a
da
final burn
tripulação,
to perform, which will be the
que é a parte
reentry
de
burn,
cima.
where it will utilize, as Sandra mentioned earlier, the 4 forward bulkhead thrusters located at the top, and we can't use those if the nose cone is closed. So it's still open, and we'll close that after that burn is complete. Now, opposite of the nose cone is the trunk. It provides attachment points for Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and cargo. One half of the trunk is covered in, in solar arrays, and that helps to generate power while Dragon is on station. The other half of the trunk contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system to space using SpaceX's new Pica tiling technology. The trunk also now has new aerodynamic fins, which help provide stability in the event of an emergency abort. Now, in the event of an abort, Dragon is outfitted with 8 Super Draco thrusters. And like the name implies, they are very similar to the nominal Draco thrusters that Dragon uses for nominal operations, but the Super Dracos are extra powerful, and they will power the astronauts to safety. Dragon's Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Dragon, which gives the crew the ability to quickly separate from Falcon 9 and safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit. This is a feature that no other spacecraft in history has possessed. Dragon is also equipped with 16 Draco thrusters, as I mentioned earlier, used to orient the spacecraft during the mission, including apogee and perigee maneuvers, orbit adjustment, and attitude control. Each Draco thruster
Para quem está
is
chegando
capable
agora
of
no nosso
generating
canal
90 pounds of
UPTV, sejam
force
todos
in the vacuum of
bem-vindos.
space.
Agora, pelo horário de
Inside,
Brasília,
the
são 5
spacecraft
horas
is
e
designed
42
to
minutos.
accommodate up to 7 crew
Estamos
members with
acompanhando então o
modular
momento
seats
do
that can be
retorno
removed and
e
replaced by
do
additional
Splashdown
cargo.
da tripulação
The
da
seats are made of
CREW-7,
carbon fiber and will be
que irá
custom
acontecer em
sized for any
instantes.
crew members flying on
Né,
board.
o Splashdown
It
já
is
está
capable
previsto
of
para
flying up to
acontecer por
7
volta das
individuals, but we only have 4 on board
6h50
today.
da manhã,
The control panel
ali
is centered between the
pela costa
pilot
da
and the
Flórida,
commander
mas pelo
seats
lado
and
do Golfo
consists
do
of 3
México.
touchscreen displays, allowing the crew to operate the vehicle
Então, a
and fly
tripulação da
it manually.
CREW-7
Once we
retorna
get that
aí
onboard view of the Dragon capsule, we'll be able to
Terra
see that
após 6
control
meses em
panel
órbita.
that, like I said, rests between the pilot and the commander seats. That's one of my favorite views that we get from crew missions because
Lembrando que logo mais, a
it makes
partir
you
das
feel like you're
10h25 da
inside the
manhã,
capsule with them.
teremos
You
então
can even
a
see some
transmissão
of the
diretamente
telemetry
lá da Nova
and the
Zelândia,
visualizations on the
com a
screens.
missão All Night Long.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the trunk as you were talking
Rocket Lab.
about Dragon. We are just about 7 minutes away from that trunk separation. Again, we do discard that trunk because it's no longer needed. It provides that power with the solar arrays to Dragon, but because they are about to deorbit and come home, that's no longer needed. So that will be separated here in just a few minutes from now, and then it will harmlessly re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. So while we await that, let's talk a little bit about some of the science that CREW-7 parted in. Over the last 23 years, crews aboard the International
Dragon SpaceX, deorbit sequence start in 5 minutes. For awareness, this will occur during a TDRS handover. The next SpaceX call will confirm nominal trunk jettison.
Dragon Copy started deorbit sequence in 5 minutes, and we'll catch you after transfer.
Então, dentro de 5 minutos, teremos o início da sequência de descida de
And we
órbita.
did just hear those words from the core here in
Boas
Hawthorne, California,
notícias,
up
né?
to
Estamos aí
Jasmin
tudo
Moghbeli,
indo
the
em
commander
ordem.
of CREW-7, letting her know
trunk
and the
então aí
CREW-7 crew know that everything is
foi
looking
liberado,
good.
né?
They're proceeding
Então aí
towards
então,
deorbit
dentro de 5
and
minutos,
re-entry
então
here,
teremos o momento da descida
targeting
de órbita.
that re-entry at
Para então aí nos
2:47
prepararmos
a.m.
para a
Pacific
reentrada.
time this morning off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. And they did mention TDRS. That's that tracking and data relay system.
Então aí o
And
momento
as
então da
Kate was
descida de
mentioning, we don't
órbita
always
a
have
partir das
views of the crew
5h49
on board
da
Dragon
manhã.
or the International Space Station, just based off of some of the handover between satellites that occurs. So this is expected, but we'll talk to the crew once the trunk is successfully jettisoned. So continuing on to talk a little bit about some of the science on board CREW-7 that they helped to conduct. Over the last 23 years, crews aboard the International Space Station have completed thousands of scientific and educational experiments, and CREW-7 added to that growing number during their 6-month mission to the space station. One of those particular studies is called CIPHER, or the Complement of Integrated Protocols for Human Exploration Research. For longer journeys to the Moon and Mars, scientists are examining how extended time in space affects the human body. Astronauts on missions of various lengths can participate in an integrated set of studies that monitors their health before, during, and after missions. Results could play a pivotal role in ensuring the safety, health, and success of astronauts on deep space exploration missions. CIPHER began with CREW-7 and is continuing with CREW-8, which launched and arrived to the space station just last week. They also contributed to Sleep in Orbit, an investigation from ESA, or the European Space Agency. This study examines the physiological differences between sleep on Earth and in space. The stages of sleep are related to brain states and can be accessed based on the brain's electrical signals. Sleep in Orbit uses an earbud EEG device that measures the brain activity of astronauts during sleep. The device was developed in Denmark to easily wear without the helmet-like network of wires used for standard EEGs, making it less likely to interfere with sleep. Results could help guide development of measures to prevent or even mitigate poor sleep and its adverse effects, enhancing safety and improving work quality during missions. Additionally, controlling microbial growth in recycled wastewater is necessary to provide water that is safe for drinking and for personal hygiene, and to protect the integrity of life support systems for human habitation in space. Bacterial adhesion and corrosion studied how spaceflight affects the formation of biofilms, which are communities of multiple species of bacteria that adhere to surfaces. This investigation looked at the ability of biofilms to corrode stainless steel surfaces, similar to those in space station's drinking water system, and examined how well disinfectants cleared out those biofilms. Results could provide insight into better ways to control and remove resistant biofilms, and could contribute to the success of future long-duration missions. So these are just a few of the more than 200 science experiments and technology demonstrations that took place during CREW-7's mission.
Now let's talk a little bit about the suits that the CREW-7 crew is wearing. They are iconic, they're gorgeous, and most importantly, they are safe. The suit's primary function is to protect the crew in the event of a cabin depressurization. If that were to occur, the suit would inflate to provide a habitable environment long enough for the crew to return home. The flame-resistant materials on the outer layer also protect the crew in the event of a fire. Custom-tailored, single-piece suit. This means that the helmet, gloves, and boots all remain attached. The helmet is made from a 3D printed nylon and has a visor that pivots open. The quick disconnect, or QD, on the right thigh mates to an umbilical on the seat. This provides air for ventilation, as well as a oxygen, nitrogen, or nitrox mixture for pressurization, and allows for the electronics to be connected all from a single location on the suit. A tubing network inside the suit delivers air to the neck and limbs to keep the crew cool while wearing the suit. The suit's communication system consists of helmet-mounted microphones and in-ear speakers. All in all, it takes less than 15 minutes to put on the suit. Of course, that is also with some practice as well. The suit, like I said, is intended to be used inside of Dragon. It's an intravehicular activity, or IVA suit. When the astronauts move onto the International Space Station, the suits actually stay on board Dragon. They hang them up to dry, and then once they're dry, they get packed away. The astronauts will then use NASA's extravehicular activity, or EVA suit, when performing activities outside of the International Space Station, such as, of course, spacewalks.
Estou de volta
a
aí
little bit of a
para
difference
5
there
horas
between
e
the two
50
suits.
minutos,
Very
1 hora
important
para o
difference because
Splashdown.
they are certainly made for two different intentions.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to jump in on the
Então, nesse momento,
EVA
a sequência
spaces
de
that you were
descida de
talking
órbita já
about for
deve ter
those
sido iniciada,
external
né?
spacewalks, we did have one spacewalk that occurred during CREW-7's mission.
Então, estamos aí
for
a 1 hora do
NASA, and Jasmin
Splashdown.
Moghbeli, the commander of CREW-7, conducted that spacewalk. It was her very first spacewalk, and it lasted 6 hours and 42 minutes.
Wow, that is a long time for a first one, just to me, having never done one.
Right, yeah, they usually are about, 6-7 hours or so. The limit on the time for a
Você está
spacewalk is what we
acompanhando
call
então o momento então
consumables.
do
So
retorno,
we
né, da
often say
tripulação da
that a
CREW-7,
spacesuit
né, após
is like a
ficarem
mini
então aí
spaceship. It
6
has all the
meses em
oxygen
órbita na
that the crew
Estação
needs to
Espacial
breathe. It purges nitrogen,
Internacional. Lembrando que o
everything
retorno,
they
né, o
need to
Splashdown,
live and work in the
né, está
environment
previsto
of the
acontecer
vacuum of
por volta
space
das
is contained
6h50
inside that
da manhã,
spacesuit. So
lá na
they
costa da
can't do that
Flórida,
forever. Obviously,
mas
there's a
pelo
limit to
lado
how long
do
those consumables last, but
Golfo do México.
typically they are around that 6-7 hour time frame.
Very cool. So we just got word that claw separation is currently underway. That is on time. We did hear a call out indicating that it was going to
Lembrando que logo
begin
mais, então, a
at the
partir das
48-minute mark, and
10h25
so
da
it looks
manhã,
like that
teremos
is
aí
tracking on
a
time. The
missão com
claw
a
is
Rocket Lab,
where the
All the
umbilicals
Night
for
Long,
the
All
power
Night
and the
Long.
telemetry from the trunk and its solar
Estamos
arrays are
aguardando
connected
então
to
aí
the
o momento
capsule.
da separação
Once we
da
are
parte de
disconnected
trás então
completely,
da
the Dragon
Dragon,
will be running
né, o trunk.
exclusively on its battery power. After that claw is completely separated, we will jettison the trunk, and that is once again when we basically separate the trunk from the vehicle, and that allows us to expose the heat shield, which will be critical for re-entry operations as the vehicle is coming back through the Earth's atmosphere.
That's right, and it looks like we're now just about 20 seconds or so away from trunk separation, so everything continuing to go really smoothly this morning, and then right after that happens will be the deorbit slew when the vehicle helps to orient itself to the proper position ahead of the deorbit burn, and we'll talk more about that as we get a little closer to deorbit burn now, about less than 5 minutes away from starting, so things
That's
really
great.
moving quickly this morning.
Yeah, that deorbit burn is important because that is when the crew commits to that exact location. If you've watched our webcasts for Splashdown or crew return missions previously, you know that we're always tracking alternative. We just got word that trunk separation is complete.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal trunk jettison.
All right, good news there. Thought we might hear something back from the crew, but as mentioned before, there is a TDRS handover, meaning we're switching from one satellite to another of the tracking and data relay satellite system. So we might not hear anything back from the crew right now, but we got good news from SpaceX core Arthur Barialt that the trunk has separated, so the heat shield is
Então, aí a
exposed, and
parte
that
de
trunk
trás,
will
né, o
naturally
trunk já foi
disintegrate
liberado da
as it also
Dragon.
re-enters the Earth's atmosphere.
And the trunk served its purpose by gathering energy from
Então,
the
em
sun through
instantes,
its solar
teremos aí o
cells and
momento da
converting that to
reentrada.
battery power. So since we separated the trunk, we can't generate any more new power, but we don't need to since we're coming home and Dragon has enough battery power already stored on board.
Yeah. Like we said, once we have views of the crew inside the capsule, we hope to bring them to you due to ground station coverage. We don't have live views through the entire
Então, instantes aí, como
show,
vocês podem
unfortunately,
observar, né,
and we would
teremos
love
aí
to see
então o
them
momento da
just as
descida
much
de órbita,
as you, so we hope to have those soon.
né, após
But
então a
I can tell you
liberação
that the
da
crew is suited up and in their seats. They performed a leak
da
check
parte
on
de
those
trás então da
suits
Dragon, né,
prior
o trunk,
to
né, então em
before we
seguida
started
então
the
teremos aí
broadcast, and
o
everything
início do
looked good with
procedimento então
those, and so
aí para a
they're
descida de
basically in their
órbita
seats,
para a
buckled in with
reentrada.
the safety harness, and everything.
E aí
Actually,
temos
look at
imagens
that. Ask as you
internas aí
shall
da
receive.
Dragon Endurance.
There we have our first views
E aí
of the
temos
morning
eles aí, né,
inside
a
Dragon
tripulação da
Endurance
Dragon
with our
Endurance.
CREW-7 crew.
da CREW-7 aí para vocês.
And as you mentioned, Kate, they are suited up for this phase of flight. They do wear those spacesuits during some of the more dynamic phases of flight, for example, during launch and as they reach orbit, as well as docking, undocking, and deorbit and splashdown. And so we are seeing a view here in the center of your screen. That's Commander Jasmin Moghbeli of
E
NASA.
no centro da tela
This
para
is her
vocês,
first
né, a
space flight.
comandante da missão, a
And we
Jasmin
are just
Moghbeli,
about 2 minutes
e
and
ao
20
lado
seconds
dela,
away from
o
that deorbit burn
Andreas
beginning.
Mogensen.
Yeah, we did see that the crew did have their visors in the open position. That is allowed for now. We will hear from SpaceX Core instruction to the crew to close their visors and put them in the lock position. I can't quite remember off the top of my head if that comes prior to deorbit burn or prior to the reentry phase, but we'll find out soon enough.
And that deorbit burn, again, will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown zone, which is targeted for off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, rather. And the deorbit burn is quite a long burn. It lasts about 14 minutes once it begins. So at this point, we're now about 1 minute and 30 seconds away from that deorbit burn beginning. Again, we're getting another view inside of Dragon here. On your left is Roscosmos cosmonaut Konstantin Borisov. And then to his right is ESA, or European Space Agency astronaut Andy Mogensen, NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Satoshi Furukawa on the far right. So now we're getting another view of Konstantin Borisov here. And like we've said a couple times, they are suited up for this phase of the flight and will remain in their spacesuits all the way through the deorbit burn, through splashdown, and as they get onto the recovery vessel, as well as they are egressed or exit Dragon.
Now, when the crew egresses from the capsule, we will utilize the side hatch, which is actually in view right here. It was that the rectangle that had the black outline just at the feet of the crew. That is the side hatch. That has been closed since when they ingressed to the capsule on launch day. So basically, when they're up at the International Space Station, they utilize the forward hatch, which is the hatch at the top
Já
of
vimos
the
aí
capsule,
imagens aí da
because
tripulação
that's
da
where the
CREW-7 a
international
bordo
docking
aí da
adapter is located, and that's
Dragon
what docks
Endurance,
to
né, se preparando
the
então aí
space
para o
station
momento
and
da
allows them
descida de
to
órbita.
ingress and egress
É
onto
para
the station
aí a
and into the
reentrada
capsule during their stay. So, and we just got a call out saying
Nesse
that
momento, então,
deorbit
estamos
burn
iniciando o
has
momento de
begun.
descida de órbita.
This burn is expected to last for about 14 minutes.
Yep, and just a quick recap here. Within the last 10 minutes, Dragon has jettisoned its trunk and initiated that deorbit burn just seconds ago, 20 seconds ago, and it is a little less than 14 minutes in all. So for these operations, NASA and SpaceX do closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of all those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Multiple notices regarding splashdown are issued to the mariners in advance and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones. So we do really want to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases the risk to
5
the
horas e
astronauts in the
58
capsule,
minutos
the
pelo
teams working to
horário de
recover them
Brasília.
from the
Estamos
water,
acompanhando
and the safety
o
of
início do
those that come
procedimento
too
então, de
close.
retorno
So for the safety of the crew
aí da
and your
CREW-7,
safety, we do recommend you sit back
então na
and watch,
atmosfera
and
da
we'll
Terra,
continue
com
to
o
bring you
procedimento
the
então de
best
descida de
possible
órbita
views
neste
of
momento.
our astronauts' homecoming.
Like I mentioned earlier, this deorbit burn is the last time that those 4 forward Draco thrusters will fire. Dragon Endurance has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere. This deorbit burn is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site. Like we mentioned earlier, we're targeting just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida today. Right now, Jasmin, Andy, Satoshi, and Konstantin are using their screens to keep tabs on the burn duration, the Draco thruster firings, and trajectory details like entry angle, capsule perigee, and how much distance remaining until the deorbit burn completes. Dragon is flying itself, so all the crew really has to do is stay strapped in their seats and keep tabs on things, which sounds easy, but I've said it before, I'll say it again. If I were in there, I would be wanting to take off my strap and look out the window because what a view it would be. Now, with Jasmin, Andy, Satoshi, and Konstantin about ready to deorbit and splash back down on planet Earth, they'll be heading to one of 7 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading the supported sites across multiple locations helps to maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad weather.
And again, NASA and SpaceX jointly selected primary splashdown location for CREW-7 off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. This selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedule for the returning crew members. And so all of those boxes were checked. Pensacola was considered prime, and we are hearing that the weather there is just perfect. The wave height is very minimal, so looking forward to see the crew splashdown here in less than an hour.
Para o Splashdown.
Now, in general, for return, we start calculating daily return
Então,
options
após essa
based
fase,
off
né, de
of
descida
the
de
space
órbita, vamos
station's
aí
current
ter o
orbit
momento
and Dragon's capabilities
logo
to
depois na
maneuver and line
sequência,
up for re-entry.
né, o período
The
de
time from
blackout, de
undock
comunicação,
to
quando
landing
então
at
aí
the
a
primary
tripulação
site
da
can vary
CREW-7
from less than
faz
6
sua
hours to
reentrada na
more than
atmosfera.
39. Getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits,
Bom dia, Renato. Seja
we always
bem-vindo
have
aí
to
à
make
nossa
sure
transmissão.
that the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations,
Lembrando que logo
which
mais, a
prevents us
partir
from
das
scheduling 20 plus
10h25
hour days for
da
them,
manhã,
thankfully.
teremos então a
Trajectory
emissão
and
com a
ballistics
Rocket Lab
experts provide
ou
the
Night
daily
Monk
opportunities that would line
lá na
up
Nova
with Dragon,
Zelândia.
Would line up
E
Dragon
mais à
with the
noite,
7
então, às
landing zones and
10h20,
split
às
them
10h30
into
da
what we call
noite,
ascending and
teremos aí
descending
então a missão
opportunities.
com a Kairos 1
Dragon uses its Draco
lá no
thrusters
Japão,
after leaving station to
onde vamos
execute
acompanhar
a
a nova
series
tentativa de
of
lançamento então, da
altitude
Kairos,
lowering maneuvers and to
da
line up
empresa
with the
então
selected
Space One.
primary site. It can also change to different alternate sites while in free flight if sudden weather moves in, so that we need to avoid hours before the crew undocks. Everything looking good, though. We are still continuing to target Pensacola. For the CREW-7 return, we looked at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside the capsule and the recovery teams on the water. We're also looking for wind speeds less than 15 feet per second, or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly Jasmin, Andy, Satoshi, and Konstantin back to Florida. Once Dragon began flying free today, we had a number of additional checkpoints to proceed towards the primary site, head to the alternative, or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we're in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which is the last burn in the trip home and commits the Dragon capsule to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And again, that deorbit burn is currently underway. We're 5 minutes and 35 seconds into it, with just about 8 minutes remaining.
Now, we are waiting to hear the call out for nominal burn to confirm completion of the deorbit burn for Dragon Endurance. As we mentioned earlier, when we have views of the capsule, we will bring them to you, but due to ground station coverage, unfortunately, we don't have them for the entire show. But the crew is in their seats, they have their suits on, and they are continuing to monitor Dragon as on its way back to planet Earth. It's like we mentioned before, it's heading to Pensacola, Florida, located in the Gulf of Mexico. On your screen now is a live view of Mission Control Hawthorne, where Dragon operators are standing by, monitoring Dragon's progress and reviewing activity and informing the crew of any changes necessary.
And so while we await that deorbit burn to wrap up, we will talk a little bit more about an upcoming cargo flight to the International Space Station. Later this month, SpaceX's 30th Commercial Resupply Services mission to the International Space Station for NASA is slated to lift off from the agency's Kennedy Space Center.
A missão de carga então da SpaceX, né, a CREW-7, né, como ela anunciou, lá na Flórida,
NASA and partner
Centro
research
Espacial
flying aboard
Kennedy ainda
the
este mês.
SpaceX 30 mission includes a look at plant metabolism in space, and a set of new sensors for free-flying Astrobee robots to provide 3D mapping capabilities. Other studies include a fluid physics study
E ainda
that
este
could
mês
benefit
teremos
solar
aí a
cell
missão
technology and a
tripulada,
university
né,
project
pelo
from
lado russo,
CSA,
lá
or the
na
Canadian Space Agency, that will
lá
monitor sea
em
ice and
Baikonur, né,
ocean
no
conditions.
Cazaquistão, né, no dia
Commercial
21
resupply
de
by
março.
U.S. companies
É o lançamento
significantly
então para
increases NASA's
Soyuz
capability to
MS-25, né,
conduct
missão
more
tripulada em direção à
investigations
Estação
aboard
Espacial
the orbiting laboratory.
Internacional,
And these investigations lead to new technologies,
no dia
medical
21 de
treatments,
março.
and products that improve life on Earth. Other U.S. government agencies, private industry, and academic and research institutions can also conduct microgravity research through the agency's partnership with the International Space
Agora, pelo
Station
horário de Brasília,
National
são
Laboratory.
6 horas e 5 minutos. Estamos aguardando então aí o término da descida de órbita.
About ongoing astronaut graduation, NASA welcomed its newest class of the next generation Artemis astronauts in a ceremony at the agency's Johnson Space Center in Houston just last week on March 5th. Selected for training in 2021, the astronaut graduates were chosen from a pool of more than 12,000 applicants. Wow, just incredible. And successfully completed more than 2 years of required basic training, including spacewalking, robotics, space station systems, and more. The graduating NASA astronauts, I will let you handle all the names, as I'm sure you've practiced them many times.
So the graduating NASA astronauts are Nicole Ayers of Colorado Springs, Colorado, Marcus Barrios of Guanabala, Puerto Rico, Chris Birch of Gilbert, Arizona, Denise Bunham of Wasilla, Alaska, Luke
Então,
Delaney
esta nova
of
turma de
Woodbury,
astronautas,
Florida,
né, que se
Andre
formaram
Douglas of
aí
Chesapeake,
nesse mês,
Florida,
né,
Jack Hathaway of
aí
South
da turma
Windsor,
então de
Connecticut, Anil
2024.
Menon of Minneapolis, Chris Williams of Potomac, Maryland, and Jessica Whitner of Clovis, California. So continuing the long tradition of international partnership, two UAE, or United Arab Emirates astronauts, Nora Al-Matrusi and Mohammed Al-Mula of the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center, trained alongside their NASA counterparts for the past 2 years, as well as participated in the graduation ceremony. The graduates are now eligible for flight and may be assigned to missions designated for the International Space Station, future commercial space stations, and Artemis missions to the Moon in preparation for Mars. And NASA has also recently announced the opening for the next round of astronaut applications. So if you are interested, you can apply if you meet the qualifications. To be considered for an astronaut position, applicants must be a U.S. citizen, have a master's degree in a STEM or science, technology, engineering, or math field, and have a minimum of 3 years of related professional experience, and be able to experience, be able to have that successful experience to complete the long-duration flight astronaut physical. The master's degree requirement can also be met by 2 years of work toward a doctoral program, a completed medical degree, or even completion of a nationally recognized test pilot school program. Astronaut candidates must also have skills in leadership, teamwork, and communications. Artemis generation astronauts will explore and conduct experiments where humans have never been.
Agora, pelo horário de Brasília, são 6 horas e 7 minutos. Estamos aguardando então o término da fase então, de descida de órbita. Estamos aí acompanhando então o momento do retorno da CREW-7. Dentro de instantes, então, após essa fase de descida de órbita, né, teremos aí um momento de período então, de blackout de comunicações. Que é o momento então da reentrada da Dragon Endurance, e logo depois, na sequência, o toque na água, né? O famoso Splashdown.
Experiences from all parts of the world and beyond. There are people
Lembrando então que o Splashdown aí está previsto para acontecer dentro de 42 minutos.
And it's just an incredible group of people. Special shout out to Anil, former SpaceXer, and we're so happy to see him among the group.
Yeah, absolutely. It is always exciting to welcome in a new class and, of course, do the recruitment. I'm really looking forward to seeing who is selected for this next round. So again, if you're just joining us, we are awaiting the return of CREW-7 after their 6-month mission to the International Space Station, where they conducted science, research, and investigations, as well as participated in technology demonstrations. We are currently awaiting the deorbit burn to end. That is a longer burn, but it now has about a minute minute and 30 seconds remaining in that deorbit burn, and that's really going to help us get in the prime position to start to dip into the Earth's atmosphere ahead of splashdown.
Yeah, that deorbit burn, as we mentioned earlier, is what really commits the crew into their final landing site. As we mentioned before, we always have a primary and a backup location, and so if for some reason the weather would have turned unfavorable or the landing area wasn't clear, we would have been able to pivot to a different landing zone. But this deorbit burn is what really commits the crew into that final selection. So we are targeting the primary splashdown site just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, in the Gulf Coast, off the Gulf Coast of Florida. And we're looking forward to having them back. The crew is in their suits. They are in their seats, and as you mentioned, they've been up there for about 6 months.
6 horas e
and
10
sure they're really
minutos.
excited to come
Você
home.
está assistindo então o
Yeah,
canal
absolutely. So
UPTV,
standing by,
acompanhando
for
o retorno
confirmation
da
that that
tripulação
deorbit
da
burn has
CREW-7
ended. We
após
expect that
6
in
meses
about
em
30
órbita na Estação
seconds or
Espacial
so. We were talking a bit about
Internacional.
the TDRS, or Tracking Data Relay System,
Lembrando então que o
handover.
Splashdown
Basically
previsto para
just a
acontecer
brief
dentro
time
de
period where
40
we may not have
minutos
communications with the crew
lá no
due to
Golfo do
those
México, ali
satellite
próximo à costa
handovers,
da
but
Flórida.
we do expect to hear confirmation that that burn was nominal.
Dragon SpaceX, deorbit burn complete.
Então
Performance
nesse momento então a descida de órbita está concluída e tudo normal.
And right on time. Great to
Dragon copy.
hear that that deorbit burn was successful.
Up next, we're going to close the nose cone, which, as I mentioned
Agora na
earlier, is
sequência então
still
teremos o
open as we
fechamento
were
do nariz
using
da
those
Dragon.
forward bulkhead Draco thrusters in order to perform that deorbit burn. So now that deorbit burn
Então
is
nesse momento
complete,
então
and as we
temos
heard, it performed normal.
teremos aí
excuse me,
em instantes, né, o momento do
nominal,
fechamento do nariz
which
da Dragon, né,
basically
para
means
que possa
normal,
acontecer a
which
reentrada.
is good news.
And in the background, Dragon is going to work to currently inhibit those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete the deorbit burn, ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone shut for reentry. And that nose cone will remain shut all the way through splashdown after this point.
Até o
Also,
momento
the
tudo
vehicle
segue
has
em ordem,
initiated the
né, de
nitrox
acordo com o
superge.
cronograma,
This helps to keep
né, para a
Jasmin,
reentrada
Andy,
então da
Satoshi, and
tripulação da
Konstantin
Dragon
cool and
Endurance.
comfortable during reentry. That reentry is coming up in about 20 minutes or so. At this point, again, the nose cone is closing to help protect the forward hatch for reentry. And the crew on board, Jasmin, Andy, Satoshi, and Konstantin, will use their screens to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by a set of hooks. So just a couple minutes out from that nose cone fully closing.
It looks like we have about a minute and a half for that nose cone to close. As you mentioned, earlier, it's not just a simple shut. There are a couple sets of hooks that have to lock in. So we're expecting that to wrap up in about a minute and a half. Shortly thereafter, we'll hear a call out. We'll probably hear a debriefing from SpaceX Core to the crew to give them the latest update on final splashdown time, as well as the anticipated loss of signal, or LOS. This happens every crew return mission, where the plasma on the outside of the capsule builds up so much so that communications and commanding of the vehicle are not allowed. And so it basically means that we won't be able to call the crew, and the crew won't be able to call down to us. That typically lasts between 5 to 7 minutes or so. So we should get a pre-reentry brief from the Corps, and hopefully we'll get the final update on expected weather. We did hear earlier that the anticipated wind speed was 4.2 knots, and that the wave height was less than 1 foot. So all in all, it should be, fingers crossed, a pretty stable recovery in terms of the crew won't be bobbing up and down too much with high waves.
Yeah, I couldn't ask for any better weather. So again, we're standing by for that nose cone to successfully close. That has remained open since the crew launched all the way back in August. The nose cone is opened shortly after launch, and the reason it needs to open is because that nose cone actually exposes all of the docking mechanisms, the umbilicals, and how the Dragon attaches to the International Space Station, and then it ultimately becomes the hatch that the crew utilizes to float on board the International Space Station. So that has been open for the past 6 months, and right now we're working on that nose cone to be closed. We do expect that call out just moments from now that the nose cone was successfully closed.
So we're going to stand by. Actually, we are now hearing that the nose cone has closed. So we will hopefully hear something from the core to confirm that, but we are seeing here that the nose cone
Estamos
has
aguardando
closed.
então o momento do
Now, as we
fechamento
begin the
do nariz
second
da
half
Dragon.
of entry, Dragon is now beginning to inject cooled
Lembrando então de deixar o like aí na transmissão, de se inscrever no canal. Estamos chegando então a 1.300 inscritos.
By Jasmin, Andy, Satoshi, and Konstantin.
Agora então pelo horário de
It's also important because they will be told to close the visors on their
Então agora
helmets,
pelo horário de Brasília são 6 horas e 14 minutos. Estamos aguardando então o momento do fechamento do nariz da Dragon para a reentrada então aí para dar os inícios da reentrada na atmosfera. Lembrando que o Splashdown então está previsto para acontecer às 6h50 da manhã na costa da Flórida, mas pelo lado do Golfo do México.
Which means that the heat shield will protect the
E logo
capsule
mais, a partir das 10h25 da manhã, teremos a missão com a Rocket Lab lá na Nova Zelândia.
Will basically be pointing forward. It will be receiving the atmosphere, and this is a good thing. The atmosphere will actually be helping us out quite a bit this evening, or this morning, I guess it is, as the capsule in its orbital velocity, which is going right now, is going 17,500 miles per hour, and that the atmosphere will actually help to reduce that speed down to about 350 miles per hour, which is when the drogue parachutes will deploy. So the atmosphere actually does us a huge favor by providing that friction that helps to slow the capsule down. It does generate a great amount of heat, though, and that's what that heat shield and the thermal protection system, which are the white panels all around the exterior of the Dragon capsule, although they're not so white after they re-enter. Looks a little bit like a toasted marshmallow. But we will get to see that live here. We are coming up to landing in just about 20 minutes or so. So we'll be able to see that for ourselves. It's one of my favorite things when we get to see the capsule being lifted out of the water and onto the recovery vessel. Now, if you've just recently joined us, we are targeting a splashdown off the Gulf Coast of Florida near Pensacola. Recovery vessel Megan is en route, is already there in position, waiting for Dragon Endurance to splash down. And we are expecting that splashdown to occur in about 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, we're targeting splashdown at 2:47 a.m. Pacific time. So the next major milestone that we are looking ahead towards this morning is EI, or entry interface, and that is when the crew begins to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and do that slowing down portion, which is critical to help bring their speed down ahead of splashdown. And during that time period, we will experience what is known as a blackout period, where we will not have communications or visuals with the crew due to that plasma building up around the heat shield. This is expected, and we will regain communications with the crew when they're on the other side of that blackout. So to talk a little bit more about the heat shield, Spacex partnered with NASA to develop PICA-X, which was the second generation product used on all Dragon 1 cargo resupply service missions that successfully resupplied the space station on 20 missions. PICA 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo. It has enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimize the heat shield and help drive down the cost and mass as well.
The remainder of the Dragon capsule is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus PICA.
SpaceX, nose cone secured for entry.
Dragon copies, nose cone secured.
All right, just back and forth there with SpaceX core Arthur Berrialt. As I was saying before, the SpaceX proprietary ablative material is another class of thermal protection and is lighter weight versus PICA, and it helps protect the underlying composite structure during reentry in order to ensure that the structural capabilities are maintained, which is super important because we reuse these capsules.
And while Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit during peak, Re-entry conditions, the characteristics of the TPS thermal protection system coupled with the ECLIS environmental control and life support system is the pressurized interior that will ensure that Jasmin Moghbeli, Andy Mogensen, Satoshi Furukawa, and Konstantin Borisov stay cool and comfortable during all phases of re-entry through Splashdown.
After Dragon Endurance has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy to slow the crew's descent. First will be the 2 drogue chutes, followed by the 4 main chutes to guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching in August of last year. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the capsule detect that they're at the right speed and altitude.
The vehicle's velocity at drogue deploy is approximately
3 horas
350
e
miles
20
per hour,
minutos pelo horário de
and those
Brasília.
drogue
Estamos então aí
parachutes do
acompanhando o nosso
deploy at
canal
about
do
18,000
PTV.
feet. Vehicle
Também então aí
velocity
da,
when
do
the main
retorno
deploy
e o
is
Splashdown, então da
initiated is
tripulação da
approximately
CREW-7 após 6
119 miles
meses
per hour, and
aí
those
de
deploy at about 6,500
em órbita, né,
feet.
na Estação Espacial
And then vehicle
Internacional.
velocity when they do splashdown is about 16
Lembrando que
miles
estamos
per
aí a
hour.
bordo da CREW-7, né,
And that,
essa
of
astronauta da
course,
NASA,
is
Comandante,
at 0
Jasmin
feet.
Moghbeli, nosso
So
piloto
those drogue
da
parachutes,
Astronauta da
we
ESA,
mentioned before that the
Andreas
atmosphere does quite a
Mogensen,
bit of work in
os
order
especialistas da
to
Missão
slow
da
the vehicle
JAXA,
down as it is
Satoshi
re-entering the atmosphere.
Furukawa
The drogue
e
parachutes
da
also do
Rússia,
a
o
tremendous amount of work. I want
cosmonauta
to give a special shout out to our Bloomfield,
Konstantin
Connecticut site that
Borisov.
manufactures our drogue parachutes, Spacex parachutes. And
Então, nesse
I've
momento
seen
aí
the
estamos
drogues in
aguardando
person, and it
o
is
momento então do
incredible
fechamento
how
total do
small they
nariz da
are.
Dragon,
Let me phrase
para
that.
que a gente
They
possa
look
entrar
small
na fase de
on
período de
on
blackout
camera,
de
but they're
comunicação, né,
actually
quando
much
então a
bigger than
Dragon
I thought they were, and it's
faz
just
aí a sua
incredible how
reentrada na
mighty they are,
atmosfera da
even though they're
Terra.
not nearly as big
Então aí fica
as the
por
main
volta aí de
parachutes are.
6 a
Like
7
Sandra
minutos
mentioned, they basically
aí de
bring
período,
the
né, de
capsule down
comunicação,
from 350
de
miles per
blackout, né, de
hour
período
to
de
about
comunicação em rádio, devido
119
então
miles per
a
hour.
altas
So those
temperaturas
drogue
elevadas
parachutes
aí devido ao
are
plasma,
important not just for
né, quando
stabilizing the
faz a
capsule, but also
reentrada.
helping to decelerate it even further. Now,
E aí
after
logo
Dragon
depois, na
Endurance
sequência, então
has
aí teremos
re-entered the Earth's
a
atmosphere,
liberação então
we were just talking about
dos
those
paraquedas, né, para
parachutes.
o momento então do splashdown, que irá
Those drogue
acontecer
parachutes,
às
those will be
6h50 da
followed by
manhã,
the 4 main parachutes to
lá na
guide
costa
Dragon
da
to
Flórida,
its first contact
no
with
Golfo do
Earth
México.
since launching in August of last year. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the capsule
Lembrando que logo
detect
mais,
that they
então,
are
às
at the
10h25
right speed
da manhã,
and altitude. So,
teremos aí então a
we have a
missão com a
lot
Rocket
coming
Lab
up
All
in
Night
basically
Long
the next
para Nova Zelândia.
10-15 minutes.
Yeah, we're targeting splashdown about 25 minutes from now. That entry interface beginning in 10 minutes, about 11, I would say, actually, and then blackout about 12 minutes and 50 seconds from now. So it's going to start to really ramp up.
Então aí
But
já
again,
temos a
everything
confirmação
is
do
moving
fechamento
along
do nariz
smoothly.
da
We did have
Dragon.
the trunk that
E dentro então
separated
de 10 minutos,
successfully. The
entre 10
nose
a 12
cone has been
minutos, então teremos
closed.
o
We
momento então
had
da
the
reentrada
orbit
aí
burn
na
that
parte
was
então de
successful as
período
well.
de
So
blackout
now
então de
we're just waiting
comunicações, né,
for
devido
Dragon
às
to
altas
dip down a little
temperaturas,
further
né,
into
durante
the
então a
atmosphere, that
reentrada
orbit to be
na
lowered
atmosfera
so
da
that they
Terra.
can begin that entry interface portion of today's flight.
Exactly, and that is expected. The crew knows, excuse me, the point of time in which that will occur, and typically we start to hear the crew hail back at us. Typically a little bit earlier than the predicted loss of signal period is. So all of this coming up in the very near term. As we mentioned earlier, things go kind of quickly. It seems like they were just undocking moments ago, and here they are already on their way back to planet Earth. Once again, we are anticipating a splashdown time of 2:48 a.m. Pacific time here, or 5:48 a.m. Eastern time. The wind speed is about 4 knots, so pretty mild, and the wave height is less than 1 foot. So all in all, really good. As for night recovery versus day recovery, this capsule in particular, Dragon Endurance, has only done night recoveries. So we've actually done nighttime splashdowns for Crew 1, Crew 2, Crew 3, Crew 5, and Crew 6, and soon Crew 7. And Dragon Endurance supported Crew 3, Crew 5, and of course Crew 7.
For entry briefing.
Dragon, proceed for entry briefing.
All right. Want to remind you we have an expected LOS at 0934 Zulu, expected AOS at 0941 Zulu. All other times are going to be accurate per the tablet timeline. No other updates at this time for entry. Weather remains nominal and recovery forces remain ready to support.
Dragon Captain, expected LS from 0934 to 0941, and copy on the weather and recovery forces.
Good readback, Jaws.
Então aí boas notícias, né? Dentro de instantes, então teremos o momento da reentrada aí na atmosfera da
And
Terra.
so those communications from the ground here in Hawthorne, California, up to CREW-7 Commander, NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli, letting her know about some of the expected events that are ahead. So first up will be the entry interface in about 8 minutes from now, and then that blackout period about 9 minutes and 45 seconds from now. We will have a loss of signal period during that time period, and then we will have splashdown. We are targeting that splashdown
Então,
again for
dentro de 9
2:47
minutos, então aí
a.m.
teremos
Pacific
o momento
time,
então
and
da
that is
reentrada,
22
início da
minutes and
procedimento
30
então da
seconds from
reentrada.
now. Everything continuing to move along smoothly. The weather off the coast
6
of
horas
Pensacola,
25
Florida
minutos.
is ideal and perfect for splashdown. The crew is feeling good. They're suited up.
E aí, então,
They've
no
completed
momento
that
então do
deorbit
período
burn.
de
The
blackout
trunk
de
has already been
comunicação, né? Ficaremos aí
separated.
mais
The
ou
nose
menos por
cone has
volta aí
been
de 6
closed.
minutos.
So we're continuing to
Aí
check
sem
through those
comunicação com a
milestones
Dragon.
and again looking
Né?
forward
Então,
to that
devido à
entry
fase então da
interface in
reentrada.
7 minutes from now.
Aí nesse momento estamos ainda
And it
com
looks like we
imagens
are getting some views
da
inside the
Dragon
capsule right now.
Endurance.
That is NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli, who is the commander.
No
She's
centro, então, aí a
the prime one you see in
Jasmin
your screen
Moghbeli.
there, and this over-the-shoulder view as well, showing European Space Agency astronaut Andy Mogensen. As Kate mentioned, we can see on their screens
Lembrando
they're
mais uma vez
monitoring
então que o
everything,
Splashdown então está
just
previsto aí
keeping
para
track
acontecer
of
às
where things are
6h50
at
da
as they
manhã
approach splashdown
na
in
costa da
21 minutes and
Flórida,
30
mais
seconds
pelo
from
lado
now.
do Golfo do
But
México.
on their end, they don't have to do much. They are able to just sit back and enjoy the ride as Dragon is an autonomous vehicle.
Yeah, that view right there, we can actually see right in the center it was showing us the splashdown zone. Once again, we are targeting off the coast of Florida near Pensacola. And that display, I believe they're able to track Dragon live as well. So that was a static view of where they are targeting, but I believe they can also track Dragon as well, which would be really fun if you're sitting there and you happen to be, re-entering over your hometown.
Lembrando que logo mais, a partir das
way below
10h25, missão
to
com a
friends and
Rocket Lab.
family. I think that'd be a pretty cool experience.
E não se
And
esqueça de
speaking of
se
that,
inscrever
Dragon
no
will
canal,
actually be re-entering right over
deixar o
my
like na
hometown in the
transmissão
middle of
e seguir o
nowhere,
canal
a
também nas
tiny
redes
town in
sociais.
Nebraska. But
Os
if you
links se
are in
encontram
the
aí na
midwestern
descrição da
portion
transmissão.
of the United States, if you go outside
Você
right
está
now,
então assistindo ao canal
will have just a
UPTV.
few minutes from now. You might be able to see Dragon as it flies overhead, beginning to fly across southwest Nebraska through Kansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and of course, splashdown off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. So if you are anywhere along that trajectory, you can look outside and see Dragon fly overhead. Again, that entry interface, when we expect Dragon to maybe first begin to be visible, will be at about 5:36 a.m. Eastern. So head outside now, and you can maybe listen to the broadcast on your phone, and we'll keep you updated. And hopefully we'll see some photos from you all of seeing CREW-7 re-enter the Earth's atmosphere.
I personally haven't seen a Dragon re-entry yet, but I have been told by friends and colleagues that have seen one that it's pretty spectacular and that it's remarkably bright, which I mean makes sense. It is going from 17,000 miles per hour down to about 350. So yeah, there will be a bright streak across the sky, and it will look.
Então, lembrando que estiver próximo aí na região da costa da Flórida, aí, né, na região então do Golfo do México, vocês poderão aí então mandar as fotos, né, depois aí da reentrada. E também aí
yes,
as
absolutely.
imagens, né,
And
quem
especially
tiver
with
depois aí as
evening
imagens
splashdown, the views
da reentrada.
should be pretty spectacular here. So it looks like we are now about 4 minutes
Já vai
away from
acontecer.
entry interface and about 6 minutes away from that blackout period beginning.
Yeah, you make a great point about views during nighttime splashdown / recovery operations. It's easy to assume that a nighttime operation is not as visible, but we have multiple vessels out there, primarily the recovery vessel Megan, with bright floodlights that we can see there. The crew is now putting their visors down in preparation for entry interface
Nesse momento, então, a tripulação fechando os capacetes, né?
This is also one of the final moments that we can see zero-G.
Dragon tablets are secured, restraints are tightened, and visors are down, all 4 crew.
SpaceX copies all for crew entry preparation. We are 5 minutes to expected blackout. We'll see you on the other side at 0941.
Okay, copy, SpaceX. We'll see you on the other side.
Então, dentro de 5 minutos, então teremos aí o momento então do período então de blackout de comunicação.
Sorry, I was just going to say that was SpaceX core Arthur Berrialt letting the crew know that they're about 5 minutes out from that entry interface, and that we expect to get their signal back, also known as acquisition of signal, or AOS, at 0941 UTC, which will be 2:41 Pacific. So we should expect to hear Jasmin's voice once again. In about in 11 minutes from now. Math is really hard at this time of night, morning, whatever it is.
Yep, absolutely. And we were just getting a view there of some of the stickers on board Dragon. Those indicate the other missions and the other crew that have flown aboard Dragon. So it's interesting to see more and more stickers fill up these Dragons as we fly more frequently. Again, we're about 2 minutes away from the entry interface beginning, 4 minutes away from the blackout. We will not have views of the crew or communications with them during that blackout period. But as the Corps mentioned to the crew just moments ago, we'll see them on the other side once they've re-entered the Earth's atmosphere and ahead of those drogue deploys and then the main. So again, if you are in any of those states that we mentioned, Nebraska, Kansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, head outside right now and you might be able to see Dragon streaking through the sky in just about 5 minutes from now. Pretty spectacular if you're up. It's something you don't want to miss.
Now you mentioned the stickers. Então,
que tiver nessas regiões, né, que ela mencionou, poderá observar a reentrada da cápsula, então, da Dragon, na região de Kansas, Mississippi, Nebraska, Louisiana. Então poderão aí observar esse momento então da reentrada da cápsula Dragon Endurance.
In keeping with this tradition, each of the NASA Dragon spacecraft astronaut crews have had the opportunity to select a name for their Dragon if it was the first mission for that Dragon. So Endurance was first flown on NASA's CREW-7 mission, which is the capsule today.
A Endurance, né, que já fez participações então das missões anteriores da CREW-3, CREW-5 e CREW-7.
It has since
temos a
flown
Freedom,
on the CREW-5
temos
mission,
a
and of course now the
Resiliência
CREW-7
e
mission,
temos a
totaling 3
Endeavour,
flights for the
está nesse momento
spacecraft.
na
A nice little
Estação
timeline
Espacial
there
Internacional.
for the different capsules that we have. We also have Dragon Endeavour, which was the first crew capsule that we launched with crew. Of course, that was with NASA astronauts Bob and Doug, our beloved space dads, flying in the Demonstration Mission 2 mission. That was in, gosh, I believe it was in March or
Temos as
May
4 cápsulas
of
da
2020.
Dragon, né?
It seems like it was
Endeavour,
just yesterday
Resilience,
in many ways.
Endurance,
and then we also
Freedom.
have Dragon Resilience, which supported multiple missions, and Dragon Endurance that we have today, as well as Dragon Freedom. So all in all, 4 current capsules that are active in the fleet. And like you said, every time a crew flies in one, they get to put a mission patch on the inside of the capsule. And they also get to sign the white room of the launch tower right before they ingress into the capsule for their launch day. So we like our traditions.
Yes, lots of traditions all around. We are about 30 seconds away from the crew beginning to first dip into the Earth's atmosphere, and we'll really be looking to the heat shield to do a lot of that work. And again, because of that plasma buildup that's going to occur, we are going to have a communications blackout with the crew during this time period, expecting that blackout to begin about a minute from now.
Yeah, that anticipated loss of signal, or that blackout period, will be about 6 minutes long, 6.5 minutes, and about a minute away, as you just said. So this happens every crew mission as the capsule is re-entering through the Earth's atmosphere, as that plasma builds up around the side of the capsule during that re-entry period, as it's coming back through the atmosphere. Right, in space there is no atmosphere, but when it's re-entering, it's starting to come back through the atmosphere, which ultimately builds up friction, and that translates into energy, such as plasma forming on the exterior of the capsule. But the crew stays quite comfortable inside the capsule. They have cooled nitrox, or nitrogen-oxygen mixture flowing through their suits, and that helps keep them cool, as well as the thermal systems within Dragon. It also helps to make sure that they stay pretty comfortable, even though the external temperatures can reach 3,500 degrees. So at this point in time, like we said, we are entering that communications blackout period right now, actually. And this lasts about 6.5 minutes due to the plasma formation around the spacecraft, as I said. Now, during this time, no vehicle telemetry is received by mission control or the recovery team, and no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible. But as a reminder, Dragon is designed to fly itself. During re-entry, the vehicle will be slowing down from an orbital velocity of about 17,500 miles per hour. The top temperature that Dragon will experience upon re-entry is about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and we do expect this blackout period to last for another 6 minutes or so. We are expecting to hear back from Jasmin at 0941 UTC or 2:41 a.m. Pacific time, and sometimes we actually acquire that signal earlier than anticipated, so we might actually hear from her a bit sooner than that.
And this is my one last plug, because it does not always re-enter over the United States. If you are in those states we've mentioned several times,
go now.
This is literally, you have like 30 seconds, so sprint outside and go and see it. We are very much so looking forward to seeing the crew splash down and seeing them re-enter from our side, but it's not going to be the same view, certainly, as what you all will have. So I hope some of you are out there looking up and enjoying the view for us.
Absolutely. Now, we do hope to bring you views from a thermal tracking cam that we hope to have once the capsule is visible. I believe the WB-57 might be on the prowl tonight, and hopefully we will also be able to bring views. We have cameras located on our recovery vessel Megan, which is in place awaiting splashdown. It's about a mile or so away from the splashdown site, and so we'll also have cameras there. So as soon as we have something to bring you, we certainly will. Once again, the capsule is going from orbital velocity about 17,000 miles per hour down to a speed of about 350 miles per hour. At that point in time, the drogue parachutes will deploy. Those are the smaller parachutes that help to stabilize the capsule and help decelerate it even further, down to about 119 miles per hour. At that point in time, and that's roughly at about 6,500 feet above the ocean surface, the main parachutes will deploy. And once again, we will hopefully bring you views once we have those.
Também aguardando imagens
and
lá
then,
do
of course,
local
once those main parachutes deploy, it's
lá do Golfo
just
do México.
a few seconds. Excuse me, it's actually more than a few seconds, because it's several thousand feet off the ocean floor. Ocean surface, excuse me. But ultimately, those main parachutes will help to decelerate the capsule down to about 16 miles per hour when it ultimately splashes down. And we are expecting that splashdown time to occur at 5:47 a.m. Eastern Time, 2:47 a.m. Pacific Time.
Yep, now less than 10 minutes, and then once splashdown occurs, we'll continue to walk you through all of the recovery operations and step through those together and explain what you're seeing on your screen. But it really is a testament to all the hard work and the folks that are pulled together to do these recovery operations. As you said, the boat was staged earlier this evening, and everything is set up and ready for CREW-7 to splash down 9 minutes and 30 seconds from now. We expect that acquisition of signal, that blackout period, to end in about 4 minutes or less from now. Again, as you mentioned, we might begin to hear the Corps start to call out to the crew to see if they've regained communications with them yet. Sometimes it happens a little earlier than we expect, sometimes a little bit later. All of that is normal. It just is dependent upon when we regain communications with the crew. So again, we're expecting that acquisition of signal in about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And it looks like we are getting our very first view of Dragon there on your screen. It is streaking through the sky as it continues to re-enter the atmosphere. Again, those parachutes have not quite deployed just yet, but once they are through the atmosphere successfully, we'll first see the drogue chutes deploy. We're targeting 2:43
Então, nesse momento temos
a.m.
imagens
for that.
aí da reentrada então da Dragon Endurance.
2:44 a.m. we'll see the main chutes deploy, and of course splashdown at 2:47 a.m.
Neste momento,
Pacific
então aí
off the
temos
coast of
imagens
Pensacola.
Yeah, this view
aí
is
da Dragon
thermal
Endurance.
view, tracking cam from
imagem
NASA's
de radar.
W57 plane.
Aí de
I
câmera de
always
infravermelho.
love seeing this come through because just the brightness gives you a good idea of, and it will start to get dimmer and dimmer as we get closer to the drogue parachute deployment. This looks like it is a live view coming from Megan, which is the recovery vessel positioned a safe distance away from the anticipated splashdown site. I believe this is the
6 horas e
tracking
40
cam,
minutos
not
pelo
thermal,
horário de Brasília, então temos aí imagens
I'm
da
not sure the
reentrada
right way
então
to
da
describe
Dragon.
it, but it's a live view camera, but adjusted for the darkness of the night sky. So that's why the pixels on the camera
Na imagem
might
então aí
look
de
a
infravermelho aí para
little wonky
vocês.
there.
And even from this view, it's just spectacular. So amazing to
Belíssimas
see.
imagens aí
We
então da
are
reentrada.
expecting the acquisition of signal to be about 2 minutes from now, and splashdown, again, we're less than 10 minutes away from that, 7 minutes or so away from splashdown of CREW-7 to
Estamos
wrap up
aguardando então
their
o retorno
6-month
do sinal.
science and research mission to the International Space Station.
Dragon SpaceX, ComCheck.
E aí, retorno do sinal da Dragon. Retorno do sinal da
All
Dragon.
right, so that was the voice.
We have you the same. Expect automated chute deployment.
That was the voice of Commander Jasmin Moghbeli. Great to hear her voice on the other side of the comms blackout. And a great view here, that thermal cam showing us live reentry of the CREW-7 team on board Dragon Endurance.
And the Corps also did let Jasmin Moghbeli and the CREW-7 crew know that they expect a nominal or normal drogue chute deploy, expecting us to maybe begin to get some views of that here in about 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes from now. And then following that will be the main chutes that deploy.
Em instante, então teremos o momento da
Continuing to get some
abertura
really
então
incredible
dos
views of
paraquedas.
CREW-7.
Dragon SpaceX GPS has converged. Expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deploy.
Então, nesse momento teremos a abertura do
All right, good news
paraquedas
there.
auxiliares.
That's an indicator that we can expect the drogue parachutes to release about the 350 mile per hour speed, or about 18,000 feet above the ocean. As I mentioned, the streak becomes dimmer just prior to the chute
Ou do
deployment.
paraquedas de emergência, né?
This view here is coming to us from our recovery vessel, Megan, which is the large vessel that will make its way out to the capsule and ultimately pick it up out of the ocean and place it in the nest on board. Now we should see the
Dragon
drogues pop out
SpaceX, brace for
here.
drogue window.
The thermal cam will provide us a much better view of the parachute deployment.
Estamos aguardando então o momento da abertura do paraquedas. 6 horas e
So we are
43
standing by for those
minutos.
drogues to deploy. We should see that begin to happen here any second from now.
Tracking to about 15 seconds until drogue deploy. Once again, Dragon is reading its altitude as well as barometric pressure to determine when the appropriate
Abertura do paraquedas.
deploying now. The
Paraquedas
appropriate
estão
time to deploy
aí
those
aberto.
drogue parachutes.
O paraquedas de emergência aberto.
And so these drogue parachutes do help to stabilize and decelerate the vehicle ahead of the mains being deployed a short time after.
Então, nesse momento estamos acompanhando o momento do retorno da Dragon, Endurance,
All right, that's great
e o
news
momento
there,
então do Splashdown.
indicating that the rate of deceleration with the drogue chutes is as expected. The main parachutes will deploy next. That will occur around the 6,500 foot mark above the ocean surface. And at that point in time, the capsule will be traveling around 120
Abertura então
miles
do
per hour.
paraquedas
We can see
principal.
those main parachutes deploying now. Those drogue parachutes
Nesse momento estamos aí com a abertura do paraquedas
land in the
principal da
ocean, and
Dragon,
hopefully
às
we will
6
be able
horas
to recover them, but they
45
kind of sink
minutos.
quickly sometimes, so the recovery teams will go out and try to recover those drogue parachutes for reuse on future cargo missions. We can see here.
Main chute descent rate nominal.
Tudo em ordem.
1 meters.
Lembrando então que o retorno da
Great news
Dragon,
there,
Endurance,
indicating that
então está
the
acontecendo
deceleration
agora,
rate of the
lá no Golfo do México,
So at this
próxima
point in
costa
time,
da
Jasmin
Flórida.
is now transitioning into calling out Dragon's altitude. Beautiful thermal view there of the capsule and 4 healthy mains.
Lindas imagens, né, que
It's
estamos
hard to tell in this view
acompanhando,
because
né,
again it is thermal.
do infravermelho, né,
the
câmeras
parachutes are
térmicas.
orange and white. If you've seen a
imagens
daytime
estão em
launch,
infravermelho.
you'll know what they look like, and we should be able to see, hopefully,
800 meters.
Dragon is now 800 meters
800
Copy,
metros.
800.
above the ocean. Now, once Dragon splashes down, the capsule will automatically cut the ties to the parachutes. This helps in the case where it might be windy. It isn't today. Wind speeds are pretty low at the moment.
600 meters.
600
But if it
metros.
were a little windy, it would help to ensure that
Copy 6.
that Dragon doesn't get destabilized by having the main parachutes. And we will also recover those main parachutes from as they float in the ocean as well.
And standing by for that splashdown, now about a minute away from that or less.
400 meters.
400 metros.
400 meters is what Jasmin just called out. So the next call out we'll hear is for 200 meters, and then of course splashdown. So continuing to get great views of 4 healthy mains as well as the Crew Dragon with 4 astronauts on board.
Bracing at 200.
And the crew is
200.
bracing for splashdown. We do hear that the fast
SpaceX
boats,
copies 200 and braced.
the fast boats are en route.
Estamos a 200 metros no toque da água.
Standing by for splashdown.
Estamos aguardando o Splashdown. E Splashdown,
What a
às 6 horas e
beautiful sight.
48
As you can see
minutos
on your
pelo horário
screen,
de
we have
Brasília. Splashdown.
Splashdown.
Splashdown. Bem-vindos de volta à tripulação CREW-7. Jasmin Moghbeli,
Visual and
Andreas
audio
Mogensen,
confirmation for splashdown
Satoshi
of
Furukawa
Dragon
e
Endurance.
Konstantin e Borisov, sejam bem-vindos de volta à Terra. Às 6 horas e 48 minutos, então, pelo horário de Brasília, então tivemos o Splashdown confirmado aí para vocês. Após 6 meses em órbita, nós tivemos aí então o momento do Splashdown.
Yeah, it's so exciting to see CREW-7 back on Earth
Então, às
after
6 horas e
199 days in
48
space. They
minutos
splashed down at 5:47
pelo horário
a.m.
de Brasília.
Eastern Time, and the teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles
Na
away in
costa da
preparation
Flórida,
for
pelo lado então
splashdown.
do Golfo do
So,
México.
SpaceX, on behalf of all of SpaceX, welcome home. We're with you in 4.800.
SpaceX is in 4.800. Thanks for the ride up and more importantly, the safe ride down.
E agora, nesse momento, então, as equipes de resgate da SpaceX estão se dirigindo então ao local, né, da queda. Que eles já estavam posicionados ali, né, na região do Golfo do México. E eles vão então fazer ali o resgate da cápsula Dragon Endurance.
and we did hear some words from NASA astronaut Jasmin
SpaceX
Moghbeli.
copies, mains cut.
We didn't quite catch them all, but of course the sentiment was her thanks for the folks that have helped supported their mission and ensured that they got back home safely on Earth. You can see that the sea is really quite smooth. It doesn't look like it's too choppy at all. And we also did hear the confirmation that the drogue parachutes were successfully cut as expected. That is something that happens in the recovery process here.
Com o Splashdown na costa da Flórida, no Golfo do México.
And once we are able, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Once the recovery vessel is closer.
I think it's stable 1.
Copy, stable 1.
So that was just Jasmin reporting on Dragon's position for splashdown. This orientation is known as stable 1, as we've seen in all of our Dragon splashdowns. But once Megan gets closer, recovery vessel Megan gets closer to the capsule, we'll be able to have not thermal, but just regular views, because those vessels that are on its way, the fast boats, as well as Megan, have lights and bright lights at that, and so we'll be able to see better views of Dragon once the recovery vessel gets a little bit closer. But that takes several minutes to complete, as the capsule, as the recovery team has been waiting 3 nautical miles away from the splashdown site. So it'll take a few minutes for Megan to chug along over to recover the CREW-7 team.
Lembrando que logo mais, a partir das 10h25 da manhã, teremos missão lá na Nova Zelândia.
As they watched CREW-7 re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, but we actually have someone on the phone who had a bird's eye view on the recovery vessel Megan. We have NASA's Rebecca Turkington, a NASA Public Affairs officer at the Johnson Space Center, who was on the boat during the re-entry and splashdown. So again, she had a great first-hand view of the crew returning and splashing down.
Fazer rápido intervalo.
Rebecca, how can you hear us?
Estão assistindo o canal WILPTV.
SpaceX is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in 1 minute.
Então, nesse momento, deu aí a ordem já para então, o procedimento do resgate.
That we do expect the recovery personnel to begin to approach.
To come on board via the display camera view only.
Então, resgate dentro de 1 minuto aí.
So while we work through that.
Hey, Sandra, how do you hear me?
Agora estamos aí na fase do resgate. Volto já já. Está então acompanhando o canal WILPTV.
And Rebecca, we're going to come back to you in just a minute as we work through these dynamic operations for recovery. Stand by and we'll be back with you in just a minute. And so we did hear those communications to CREW-7, letting them know that the recovery teams would begin to approach here momentarily. So we might be able to get some views on our screens as we see those fast boats begin to approach the Dragon capsule.
Exactly. So there's, excuse me, a couple fast boats that are dedicated to retrieving the parachutes out of the water, as well as a fast boat that will be dedicated to approaching the capsule and basically using personal protective equipment to for the folks that are on the boat, because at this point in time, Dragon has just come back from space. It's possible that there are some residual hypergolic fumes around the Draco thrusters and around the nose cone. So the team is actually going to approach with a hypergol sniffer.
SpaceX, just for awareness, we are on board with the display camera at this time.
Okay, copy, on board with the flight camera.
And that was just SpaceX Core letting the CREW-7 team know that there it is, that view is online once again. This allows us to see over their shoulders and once again see what they're looking at on their screens. At this point in time, it should be pretty stagnant in terms of none of the Draco thrusters are going to be firing anymore. They're already back in the water, so there's no trajectory to look at. And there we can see on the right-hand side of your screen one of those fast boats approaching the Dragon Endurance capsule. And as I was saying, there could be residual hypergolic fumes or left over around the Draco thrusters or around the nose cone. So that team is actually approaching with PPE or personal protective equipment, such as respirators and masks, to approach closely Dragon Endurance, but they will actually use a hypergol sniffer to detect whether or not there are any of those fumes lingering. This takes a couple minutes to complete, and once they basically check and get green light in terms of no residuals, no fumes lingering, they will give the green light for the rest of the recovery team to approach the capsule and begin the rigging of the capsule for onboarding it onto the recovery vessel. But I think the communications have slowed down for a minute, so I'd love to hear what it was like on the boat.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to Rebecca Turkington, NASA Public Affairs Officer, who was on the boat during CREW-7 re-entry and splashdown. And let's see if we do have a good comms check with her at this point. Rebecca, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How do you read me?
We've got you loud and clear. Thank you so much for your patience there as we work through some of those communications back and forth with the crew. So I would love to know, Rebecca, how was the view from the recovery vessel? What was it like? Tell us everything.
Well, I think a lot of us on board the ship have a new core memory after seeing Dragon splash down this morning. We were about 1.5 nautical miles away from the landing zone. Had a great view from the front of the ship. We saw the spacecraft appear across the horizon, a gorgeous reflection on the ocean, heard a really nice sonic boom, and we tracked Dragon all the way down to Splashdown. And it's great to see CREW-7 back home, and wow, just what a way to start the morning.
I love to hear that. I can tell from the excitement in your voice that it was pretty spectacular. So I'm so happy you were able to witness this. So the next question we have for you is about the weather. We've been tracking the weather throughout this journey. Teams, of course, gave the go for landing off of Pensacola here today. So how have the landing conditions been from your perspective?
Well, Sandra, CREW-7 may have missed out on fall and winter back here on Earth while they were on board the International Space Station, but they're going to get a little taste of it this morning. It's in the low 40s out here, but winds are very light, coming in about 2 miles per hour, and we have just about 1 foot of wave height. You can really barely feel it on the ship right now.
Wow.
So conditions are about as ideal as they can be when it comes to those wind and waves, but it will definitely be a very refreshing first breath for the crew that they take back here on Earth.
Absolutely. That sea really looks glass-like almost. So just a couple more questions for you. Can you describe the journey of the recovery forces to get to this point and what that entailed?
Yeah, absolutely. So our original journey started almost close to a week ago in Florida, with so many teams coming in to make preparations for the crew's return. After Pensacola was selected as our splashdown site, the recovery team and the vessels were relocated here. And for splashdown this morning, it was an early start. We took a series of helicopters out to the recovery vessel starting at about 4.5 hours before splashdown. The medical team and recovery director were on that first flight,
Dragon
and then
SpaceX,
the rest of us followed after
hypergol
that.
sweeps and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is now in progress.
That's great to hear, Rebecca, and we are hearing
Então,
that
nesse momento,
the
estamos
hypergol
acompanhando aí o
SpaceX
momento então do resgate da Dragon. Como vocês podem então observar nas imagens, né, as equipes já se encontram então ali no local, né, fazendo então todo o procedimento então de resgate. No lado esquerdo também estamos vendo aí a imagem da Dragon Endurance, né, imagens internas. Nós já estamos então na fase então de resgate da Dragon. Lembrando que logo mais às 10h25 da manhã, então teremos aí a missão com a Rocket Lab. Então não se esqueça, né, de deixar o seu like na transmissão e de se inscrever no canal. Estamos aí nos aproximando então da marca de 1.300 inscritos aqui no canal. Lembrando que aqui vocês acompanham todos os movimentos, né, desde o início até o final.
Inventory and process those high priority cargo items. Some teams are going to come in here to Florida to pick those up, and then others we are going to ship out to various national centers. So it's just been such a beautiful splashdown this morning, and so happy and proud to be here. And with that, I'll turn things back over to you at Hawthorne.
Well, there you had it, a first-hand experience of what it was like to witness CREW-7 splash down off of Pensacola. Thank you so much for your time, Rebecca. That was Rebecca Turkington, NASA Public Affairs Officer at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas.
All right, so as you can see there on your screen, that's a live view on the left-hand side inside Dragon Endurance. On the right-hand side is thermal cam tracking the recovery operations.
Dragon SpaceX ComCheck on Dragon to ground public.
We've got you loud and clear.
All right, have you the same. I'll be back on board with updates as we get closer to capsule lift.
Okay, we copy. Thanks.
So while the CREW-7 crew members were doing their private conference with the flight surgeon post-splashdown, just an initial check to make sure that everybody's feeling okay, doing good. We took those comms out.
O splashdown aconteceu às 6h48 da manhã pelo horário de Brasília. Estamos aí agora pelo horário de Brasília às 7h01.
Dragon SpaceX, be advised, we're going to be transitioning the forward link. Comm will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes.
Então, nesse momento, estamos aí acompanhando o momento do resgate da Dragon Endurance.
So at this point in time, the recovery team is kind of split in half. Half of them are located on the recovery vessel Megan, which is the location from which we were receiving that camera view that we just had previously. This one is obviously coming from inside the Dragon capsule. But the other half of the recovery teams are in those fast boats. They've been tasked with retrieving the parachutes from the water, as well as performing the safety checks post-splashdown. Once again, those were basically performing checks to make sure there weren't any hypergolic or pyrotechnic residuals, which, obviously pyrotechnic could be dangerous for explosive reasons, but hypergolics are incredibly poisonous if you breathe them. So we weren't able to see it super clearly on the screen. However, the crew out there had personal protective equipment to ensure that they were breathing, clean air while they were performing those checks. Those sweeps we heard were nominal, so that was the green light for the other portion of the fast boat crew to approach. And there is actually a SpaceX recovery team member crawling around the capsule at this moment in time. Hopefully we can get that view back momentarily. It looked like there might have been something in the way of the camera previously, but when we have that view back, we'll bring it to you. But there's an individual responsible for basically securing the harnesses around the capsule itself. Those will be used to lift the capsule out of the water and onto the recovery vessel.
Está assistindo ao canal WilPTV. Estamos na fase aí de resgate da cápsula Dragon Endurance, né, que fez a sua reentrada. E o Splashdown agora há pouco, às 6 horas e 48 minutos, no Golfo do México, na costa da Flórida. Então aí temos aí imagens internas da Dragon. Lembrando então que a tripulação da Dragon Endurance é composta aí pela seguinte tripulação, né? Astronauta da NASA, Jasmin Moghbeli, né? Nosso comandante. Astronauta da ESA, Andreas Mogensen, da Dinamarca, piloto. Astronauta da JAXA, Satoshi Furukawa, é nosso especialista. E da Rússia, nosso cosmonauta Konstantin Borisov, nosso segundo especialista da missão.
Plop the capsule into the nest
então eles
on
retornam
the
à
aft
Terra
end
após 6 meses em órbita, então na Estação Espacial Internacional. Lembrando que ainda para este mês teremos aí toda a nova tripulação para a Estação Espacial Internacional pelo lado russo desta vez. O lançamento então será no dia 21 de março, pela parte da manhã, lá em Baikonur, no Cazaquistão.
Pardon me. That side hatch is the same hatch that they used to ingress. How many days did you say? 199 days?
Yes, they were in space for 199 days. Of those, 197 were on board Space Station, of course, to include the transit to and from Space Station.
Gotcha. So all that time, that side hatch has remained closed as the crew was
então teremos aí a missão com a Rocket Lab a partir das 10h25 da manhã, missão on-night long.
Adapter is located, so that's the point in which Dragon has to dock with the space station. So yeah, that side hatch that we can kind of see there, it will open for the first
logo
time
mais à noite, né? Vou deixar
in
depois,
hundreds
né?
of
Aí vai
days,
estar as coisas
and it will
tudo
be
logo à noite, tá?
CREW-7's first breath of fresh
Traz
air
aí então um resumo para
since they
vocês
lifted off.
o que aconteceu,
that
tá
side
bom?
hatch, of course, goes through multiple checks while it's still
E
on
também
the ground,
hoje à noite teremos aí a nova tentativa para o lançamento então da Kairos,
for use while it is
pela missão aí da On Space.
Yeah, absolutely right. And if you're just joining us,
Japão,
it's been a busy but very exciting early morning for us here in Hawthorne. CREW-7 Splashdown off of the coast of Pensacola, Florida at 2:47 a.m. Pacific time. The crew is still in the capsule awaiting
Estamos aguardando então o momento aí do
fully
resgate da
recovered
Dragon
while the team
Endurance.
works through that. They'll eventually, as you were discussing, Kate, be moved onto the boat and be able to get out of the hatch that is directly in front of them. But just some quick facts about the CREW-7 mission. As we said, they spent 199 days in space total. Of those, 197 were spent on the International Space Station. They completed 3,184 orbits of the Earth and traveled more than 84,434,000 statute miles around the Earth, which is just a massive number when you think about it. Andy Mogensen has logged 199 days in space over his increments. Of course, he was a part of Expedition 69 and 70, and will have totaled 209 days in space, including time from his previous spaceflight. This is NASA astronaut and commander of CREW-7, Jasmin Moghbeli's first space flight, so of course she's logged 199 days in space. Satoshi Furukawa of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency has the most time in space of this crew. He has logged a total of 366 days in space over 2 flights. And Konstantin Borisov of Roscosmos has spent 199 days in space as well. This was his very first space flight. Just a couple more fun facts for you all. The crew saw the arrival of 7 visiting vehicles, which included 2 Spacex cargo Dragons. That was Spacex 28 and Spacex 29.
Dragon SpaceX, ComCheck.
Então, temos aí imagens aéreas aí então do barco então de resgate.
Forward link transition is complete.
né, onde então dentro de instantes, né, a cápsula Dragon então vai se
And
posicionar
so we did hear that call out
para
a few minutes ago
que
that
seja
there
então
would be
erguida
about a
e
5-minute
transportada
comms
então para o
outage while they
barco de
work to
resgate,
get communications
aí onde
configured.
vamos
All
então
of that is now
um a
configured
né,
properly, so
acompanhar
we
aí a
might hear
saída
some more
dos
communications
astronautas.
back and forth with the crew ahead of their recovery and placement on the recovery vessel. But just to continue those fun facts for you all, so the crew did see 7 visiting vehicles arrive. They saw 7 visiting vehicles depart, and there was 1 spacewalk that took place during the CREW-7 mission, and that included NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli for a 6-hour and 42-minute spacewalk, the very first in her career.
7 horas 8 minutos.
Wow, what
pelo horário
an
de Brasília.
incredible stay on station.
And the hundreds of science experiments that they also contributed to as well. So they were certainly busy during this increment.
I bet they're probably looking forward to a nap or two once they are back on firm ground and have gone through their end of mission proceedings.
Yep, absolutely. And once they are successfully on the recovery boat, they will take that helicopter back to Florida since they splashed down off the coast of Pensacola, and then they'll ride in a plane back to Houston and complete some additional medical checks, some rehabilitation, and then for both Satoshi and Konstantin, they'll fly back, and Andy as well, they'll fly back to their respective countries. This was the very first mission, actually, where every single seat is occupied by a member from a different space agency. So that's exciting to see as well.
Very cool. Now, on the note of recovery after performing a long duration space flight, we will be assisting the crew members outside as they egress through the side hatch. This is standard procedure for NASA crew missions, because they have been up there for an extensive amount of time. And of course, the body changes while you're in microgravity.
Dragon SpaceX rigging is complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
Dentro de
Alright, so
5
that's great news
minutos,
there.
então aí vamos ter o momento da colocação aí
So you can
da
see the recovery
da
platform
cápsula então no
there in
barco
the
de resgate.
foreground of this particular view. That is exactly where the crew will ultimately be assisted to.
Aí temos as imagens
And then we can see the Dragon
aí do
capsule
barco
in
de
the
resgate.
background there. Bobbing
Então,
very
dentro de
gently
5 minutos,
in the
então aí por
silky
volta
black
das
waters
7 horas
there.
e
I
5
have to
minutos
say, I've
e
covered
15 minutos, né, teremos
this
então o
is
momento
probably
da
my
colocação então aí do
maybe 7th
da cápsula Dragon
Splashdown
então no barco de
webcast,
resgate.
and this is, to my memory, the smoothest sea I've ever seen. Some of the views that we had earlier, the water just looked like glass. The waves are so calm. So it's great to see. Obviously, those make for easier, quicker recovery conditions. We did hear about a minute ago that we're 5 minutes out, so now 4 minutes out from lifting the capsule. There is a hydraulic lift there at the back end of the capsule. Oh, there's a great view of it there with our recovery team members positioning the hydraulic lift into place. The team member that was on the capsule, I think they may have jumped off already. Yeah, it looks like the fast boat is departing. So that's always one of my favorite, but also like terrifying moments to watch, is that SpaceX team member with oh, actually, no, they're still there. So the area where they're standing is actually the bay where the main parachutes are packed. So all 4 parachutes are packed so tightly, they fit back there into that bin you could think of. So that SpaceX recovery team member is doing the final preparations for the harnesses there on Dragon Endurance, which will be basically hooked onto by the rigging. We can see that hydraulic lift now being lowered. Once everything is attached, we will see that individual that is on the capsule jump off into the water. And of course, we don't want them to be on the capsule while it is being translated up and onto the vessel for obvious safety reasons.
And Dragon will remain in the nest during the crew extraction and then for the journey back into port. So we'll stand by for that lifting to happen just a couple minutes from now once they get everything successfully secured. And so I did just want to jump into, we were talking a bit about the crew and how they would be helped out of the capsule, and this is a very standard procedure for NASA.
Dragon SpaceX, brace for capsule lift.
Então estamos aguardando então o momento do lift,
Dragon copy.
né, do levantamento,
And
então
so
aí da
you will see
cápsula
that
Dragon.
individual jump off the capsule here in just a second, and then the capsule will be lifted onto the recovery vessel.
I like to think of this as the SpaceX swan dive.
Então, em instantes, então, a cápsula Dragon
we
então
can
vai
see
fazer
jumped
então
in and is now making his
lift,
way
né?
over to the
Vai
fast
se
boat
erguer,
where his SpaceX
né?
recovery team
Então aí vai
members will pull
aí
him on board
para
just like that.
posicionar onde está aí
now
no
don't
centro
blink
então da sua
because
tela, né?
the lifting
Onde a
of the
cápsula Dragon
capsule
então vai fazer
takes
aí
just a
o seu
matter of seconds. It's
posicionamento aí
quite smooth and
para que
happens
então
rather
os
quickly.
astronautas, né, possam
Like you were
fazer
saying,
a
we're
sua
going to lift
saída.
that up out of the water and place it in the nest. That nest will then get translated to the recovery deck, and there we can
Lift.
see Dragon Endurance now being lifted out of the water using those hydraulic lifts. Swinging a little bit, but it will be centered using the tethers and then placed into that nest once centered. All in all, this seems like a pretty quick recovery. Let's see, if we had Splashdown at
247.
57. I don't want to call this for sure, but this definitely feels like
Então,
one
nesse
of
momento,
the
às
fastest
7 horas
recoveries I've
14
ever been a
minutos
part of.
pelo horário de Brasília. Nesse momento estamos aí a tripulação da CREW-7 nesse momento está a bordo então do barco de resgate.
Dragon copy.
So at 6:14 a.m. Eastern, 3:14 a.m. Pacific, Dragon Endurance has been lifted up and out of the Gulf of Mexico and is now secure
Então, e a próxima etapa
on our
então do
recovery
nosso
vessel.
procedimento de resgate será então aí a liberação então da escotilha e a
And
liberação
so
então de
next up,
um a
we
um
will see
aí,
Dragon
então dos
appear to
astronautas.
slide forward as it gets a little further in on the recovery vessel, and then the team will work to open up that hatch and get the crew out. Again, we do expect the crew to be assisted in getting removed from the capsule because they have been aboard the International Space Station for the past 6 months. Even though they work out for a couple hours a day to maintain bone and muscle health, the adjustment back to the 1G environment on Earth can be something that takes a little getting used to. So as a safety precaution, we always do just help any of our crew members returning from space out of the vessel. So again, we're about 30 minutes or so since we splashed down, or since CREW-7 rather splashed down off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. They're already on the recovery vessel, and we are just awaiting the next steps in the process in order to get the crew out safe and sound. And the hatch that they'll actually be exiting or egressing from is in the center of your screen there. It's kind of a square-shaped it's a square-shaped hatch there, and we'll see the teams install a bit of hardware around the edge of the hatch once they get it open to help protect it, and then we'll see the crew come out. But we also will see the footrest get removed to give a little more space for the crew as they work through those recovery operations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we want to ensure that astronaut safety is, priority number one, and removing those footrests helps with that because, like you said, we will be assisting the crew to egress out of the capsule, and removing the footrest just gives the recovery teams a bit more room inside the capsule to move around along with the crew.
Absolutely, and you can see a more internal view of the hatch that we were just referring to there. Towards the lower portion of your screen, you can see the black outline around it. That is, of course, the hatch that the crew will exit out of. That's been closed since they entered in Dragon all the way back in August for their launch.
For those of you that have just recently tuned in, we had an on-time splashdown of CREW-7 at 5:47 a.m. Eastern, 2:47 a.m. Pacific, and just 3 minutes ago, the Dragon Endurance capsule, excuse me, was lifted up and out of the water and into the nest of the recovery
Então agora,
vessel.
dentro de instantes, então teremos o momento da abertura da escotilha da Dragon.
Golf operations is
E
Megan,
então a saída da tripulação
one not
aí
being used today is for
da
the Atlantic
CREW-7.
operations. What we see here are, this is a cool view because we can see it better now. I want to point it out before we lose it, is that bay where the main parachutes are stored. That is the rounded square just below the side hatch, right underneath where that individual is stepping into. So if you can imagine, that gives you a good perspective of just how tightly those main parachutes have to be packed in there in order to stow them and obviously release them. And the drogue parachutes, for those of you that might be wondering, we don't really have quite as good of a view, but they come from the bay just above the side hatch.
And so the next major milestone that we will look ahead to see is when Dragon will slide a little further back in the recovery boat, like we mentioned earlier, and then we'll have the hatch opening process begin to get underway. So again, everything continuing to go really smoothly this morning following a splashdown at 2:47 a.m. Pacific of CREW-7, completing their 199-day mission in space, 197 days aboard the International Space Station. The crew actually undocked from the International Space Station yesterday morning at 8:20 a.m. Pacific. So like we mentioned, a little less than 24 hours for their journey back to Earth. But everything going smoothly. They splashed down successfully off the coast of Pensacola, and now the recovery team is just working through those procedures in order to get the hatch open and get the crew out here shortly.
At this point in time, as you can see, the Dragon vehicle is still positioned at the aft end of the recovery vessel. Once everything is in place, we will translate the nest where the capsule is sitting forward toward the forward end of the vessel, and that is where the recovery deck is located, where additional SpaceX team members and NASA team members are awaiting the CREW-7 team. SpaceX team members will go through the side hatch opening procedure, which involves an additional sweep for hypergolics and like you mentioned earlier, removing the side hatch and placing a bit of protective covering around the edge of the side hatch. This helps to protect not only the capsule, but also the team members that are going in the capsule to help the CREW-7 crew members egress through the side hatch.
So it does look like they are
Estamos então
starting
aguardando
to
o
wrap
momento da
up
abertura da
this portion of
escotilha da
Dragon being in
Dragon.
the nest. So we should expect that
7 horas
translation to
21
occur here
minutos,
in
pelo
just a
horário
couple
de
minutes from now.
Brasília. Estamos então
We'll
acompanhando agora
remove some
a
of
fase
those
então
attachments from the vehicle
do
before
resgate da
that
tripulação
translation
da
occurs.
CREW-7. Nesse momento então vocês podem acompanhar, né, as equipes da SpaceX, né, estão fazendo então os preparativos aí para a abertura então da escotilha da Dragon.
And so from this view, we do have a pretty good view of both the
Né,
nose
lembrando
cone being
que esta
closed, which
operação então
closed
demora
prior
cerca aí de
to
1 hora, né?
splashdown,
Aí
but
após
that
então o
is
momento
the
do
hatch
resgate,
that the crew used when they docked to the International Space
a
Station,
água
as well
até
as
então a
entered
saída
the International Space
da tripulação.
Station. It's not the one that they're going to
Logo
exit
mais,
out
daqui a
of.
pouquinho, às
This morning, though, they're
10h25 da
going
manhã,
to exit
teremos
out of
então
that
aí a
side
missão
hatch
com
there.
a
You can
Rocket
see it in the
Lab.
middle of the Dragon capsule.
Daqui a 3 horas.
We also have a good view of Dragon's
Logo
thermal
mais à
protection
noite, então,
system,
Depois
also
que eu
known as
retornar então pra
TPS.
casa, né? Aí do
That
trabalho, né?
is all of the white
Aí
paneling
eu
around the
vou fazer
side.
a edição
Of
direitinho,
course,
né, pra
after
vocês,
re-entry,
né,
it
do resumo
is
então que
a little less
aconteceu
white than
aí
before. If
ao
you
longo do
recall,
dia,
on
né?
launch
Onde
day,
também tivemos
it
também
was a
lançamento
pristine white,
lá
and that is not the case
lá na
anymore,
Suécia, né, com a
as the
missão
thermal protection
Nexus.
system has done its job,
Tivemos
and quite
lançamento
beautifully.
lá por lá.
I love how
E
no
logo mais
capsule
tarde
return
também,
is
às
identical.
10
They're kind of
10h30
like a
da
fingerprint.
noite,
They all look a little different.
teremos então a nova tentativa para o lançamento então da Kairos e da Space One.
And following the crew getting
essa
out
semana,
of the
né,
Dragon, they
encheada de
will, as we mentioned,
de
be
atrações aí para vocês, lembrando
taken
que
by helicopter back to
estamos
shore,
já
and
temos
then
a confirmação
eventually
então
back by plane to Houston,
do
Texas.
lançamento da missão
And the
Starlink,
Dragon
né, para o
vehicle
dia
will
13
be
amanhã,
refurbished, taken
é do grupo
back to the
644,
processing
se não me
facility
engano, o
in order
lançamento
to
está
be
previsto
reused
para as
again.
20h19. Então nesse momento estamos vendo
And so it does look like we are
aí
seeing that translation
a vinda, né,
on your screen.
da cápsula Dragon, ali então onde ela vai encostar já no suporte ali, né, para a saída então da tripulação da
And another
CREW-7,
view
como
here,
vocês
we
podem
can continue
acompanhar.
to see that translation as it occurs. It'll get put right in between
já vai
those
encaixar
two
então nesse
gate
recuo aí,
looking
né,
areas, and then the crew
para
can begin to work hatch opening operations.
então aí a
We can
abertura
also
então
see
da
a SpaceX
escotilha
team member
em
hosing
instantes.
the vehicle down. This helps to wash some of the salt water off. Obviously, we want to ensure
Então,
that
10 minutos após então o
corrosion is
momento do
controlled.
lift,
Anything that comes into
né, que
contact
tivemos
with
aí
salt water, salt in general,
da Dragon.
is quite corrosive,
Então
and
ela
so
vem se
we're going to start
aproximou então aí
basically
já
rinsing the capsule
aí
off
da
to try and remove
suporte,
as
né?
much of that salt water as possible.
Aí agora nesse momento estamos aguardando a abertura da escotilha.
And so some of the next
Dragon.
steps that we'll see will be personnel on the recovery vessel
E a
that
liberação
are
então um a
specialized in
dos
opening up the
astronautas
hatch begin that
CREW-7.
process.
Yeah, we can actually see they've donned their PPE once
Então, como eu
again.
estava falando,
So they're
logo
going
mais
to perform some
dentro de
additional
3
safety
horas
checks
teremos
to
então aí
ensure
a
that there
missão
are
da
no
Rocket
hypergolic
Lab
residuals or
night long.
fumes there around the side
E à
hatch.
noite,
Once again, this is
então aí às
the hypergolic
22h30,
fumes are
aí
toxic
teremos então nova
if you
tentativa
breathe
para o
them in,
lançamento
so
da
we want to
Kairos,
ensure that
da
none of
Space
those
One.
are remaining.
And this view back
E hoje mais cedo
inside
tivemos também
Dragon,
o lançamento
as you can see,
lá na Suécia,
NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli,
quarto lançamento
commander,
deste ano na
and
Suécia.
ESA, European Space Agency
missão
astronaut
Nexus.
Andy Mogensen.
Então logo mais à
Jasmin's
noite,
first flight,
né,
and
assim
it
que eu
is
voltar então
Andy's second
ao
space
trabalho,
flight.
lembrando que eu faço então trabalhando externamente, né? Não só no canal, mas também a parte externa também.
And so we also do have
Aí eu
medical
coloco
doctors
tudo
on
pra
board that
vocês,
help to take care of the
direitinho,
crew after
do
the
que
hatch
aconteceu,
opening
então, ao longo do
and
dia, tá
will
bom?
conduct a
Não se
series of
preocupe.
initial checks before they are
Beleza.
flown off by that helicopter back to shore.
Então, dia 13, então, por volta aí das 20 horas
So as the team
19
continues
minutos,
to
né?
work through those hatch opening
Aí teremos a
operations,
missão Starlink.
it is important to
do
note
grupo
that
644.
Jasmin Moghbeli,
O
Andy
lançamento
Mogensen,
será
Satoshi Furukawa,
lá
and Konstantin
na
Borisov
Flórida,
will be getting some assistance from their
na-
recovery
no Centro
teams while they
Espacial
exit the
Kennedy.
capsule. So this is the same process for any returning
Também
long-duration
teremos
space flight
no dia
for
14,
Dragon.
missão
You
Starship,
also
né,
see
voo
it when we
integrado.
have the Soyuz
Aí
that
com o
lands with
Starship,
crew on board.
o
They're
terceiro
helped out of
teste
the
de voo.
capsule and then transported via chair over to the medical recovery tent. So this is standard operating procedure
Então,
for
aí semana
long-duration
recheada
space
então, de
flights.
atrações para vocês. E lembrando que dia 21 teremos a ida da nova tripulação pelo lado russo na Estação Espacial Internacional. Dia 21. E também ainda este mês teremos a
So it
missão de
hasn't
carga da
even been an
Dragon
hour since
and da
CREW-7
SpaceX,
splashed down at
missão
2:47 a.m.
CRS-2030.
Pacific, and they are already on the recovery vessel. The team has secured them in the Dragon's nest and completed that translation maneuver to get them a little bit
Lembrando que
closer
estamos aí
into their
também
prime
próximos
position
aí
for
da
hatch
nossa
opening.
meta, a
And they are beginning to step through some of those
monetização, né, do canal
procedures
no
to
YouTube.
get
no
that
YouTube.
hatch open here
Vai
shortly.
faltando apenas cumprir nossa meta aí dos horários, né?
Getting
Faltando aí
another
3
view
km de
here
hora.
of the hatch. You can
Nós
see
estamos aí nos
it pretty
aproximando,
clearly
né,
in your screen.
dessa nossa meta. Então, peço sempre aí o apoio de
We can
vocês para
see that
assistirem
they've
então os nossos
removed the
vídeos,
access
né?
panel
Deixar o
on the
like
side
e se
hatch.
inscrever, né? Continue se
Excuse
inscrevendo
me.
também no canal.
That
E para você
side
não
hatch
perder
access
nada
panel
aí da programação,
basically protects
né? Também se
the
inscreva lá
location
nas
where
redes sociais,
we
no X
perform the side
e
hatch
também no
leak check.
Instagram.
So we will
Dragon SpaceX,
Apesar de ainda
stand
não
by
ser
for side
verificado
hatch
nem no
opening
X
and egress.
e
We'll be
nem
passing
no,
you off to the recovery team. And see you back
no
in Hopper's
Instagram,
in.
né? Mas se inscreve lá para dar aquela força lá.
Dragon captains, they're here.
So yeah, that side hatch access panel is where we are able to untorque
Nesse momento
as you can
estamos aí
see
na
in
abertura
action
da
now.
escotilha da Dragon. Então, nesse momento a escotilha da Dragon se abre.
And the side hatch is open for the first time in 199 days.
Então aí após 6 meses, aí
Like we're getting some waves
In
from
orbiter. a
CREW-7.
escotilha da Dragon então se abre novamente.
First face they've seen back on Earth since August.
Once again, this is their first brush of first
Aí ele
breath
perguntaram,
of
né,
fresh
se tá tudo
air
ok com eles, né? Se tá tudo em ordem.
in several months, and
E
once again,
então
the
vai
first
falar
time that
então
the side
daqui a
hatch
pouco aí
has
sobre
been
os
open.
procedimentos, né,
The last time it was open was the day they went to space.
para então a saída, né,
So it looks like
Cada
here just the SpaceX team member doing initial check-in with the crew, making sure that everybody is feeling
perguntando se eles
okay
precisam aí de algum auxílio,
and feels ready to
né, se
egress
está
from
tudo
the
bem aqui
capsule.
com eles.
Probably letting them know that there is, no return trip at this moment, no rocket in place.
I'll have to wait to be reassigned for the next one, I guess. Yeah, so again, CREW-7 launched back in August 26th of 2023. So in all, they spent 199 days in space. And so we will begin to see some of that safety equipment installed around the hatch just for protection purposes and for reuse capabilities. And then we'll even begin to see some of those footrests begin to be removed to just give
Estamos aí
the
também
crew a
nos
little more
aproximando
space
dos
to get out.
1.300
But first, a
inscritos
photo
no canal.
opportunity.
Yep, absolutely.
We probably couldn't see it from this view, but I have a feeling that there was some thumbs up for the photo. So at this point in time, we should see some of those footrests begin to be removed. Not entirely sure what
Então agora nesse
the
momento eles vão fazer os
order will
preparativos
be
aí para a
here in
saída.
terms of who will
de 1 a 1.
egress first. It always varies from crew to crew, but it looks like we may have some footrests
7
coming
horas
off now.
30
Once again, this
minutos.
just allows the folks that are assisting the crew in their egress a little bit more room to work.
Então geralmente o primeiro a sair na Dragon, né?
Fun fact, the
Da cápsula
footrests
Dragon
are
geralmente
custom
é
sized
comandante, depois
to
vem o
each
piloto.
astronaut in terms of like small, medium, or
Então
large.
nesse momento eles já
So in
removem
order
aí os
to
cintos.
ensure maximum safety and comfort, we customize the footrest as well as the armrest, as well as the bucket itself, the seat bucket rather, that they sit in. As every astronaut is different, and so to ensure that everybody is able to
Então
remain
geralmente
comfortable
a
and safe,
primeira pessoa a sair então da cápsula
those
Dragon, né?
items are
Então
customized
aí
for
será
their
aí,
body proportions,
né, a
as well
Jasmin,
as the
depois aí
spacesuits
o
themselves.
Andreas,
Speaking of spacesuits, we can see that those
Satoshi
visors
e o
are
Konstantin.
in the open and up
Nessa ordem.
position. So once the crew was safely splashed down, they were given the okay to lift the visors. No need to keep those down and in the locked position once we were outside of those dynamic events. For those of you that have just recently joined us, we had a beautiful nighttime splashdown at 5:47 a.m. Eastern or 2:47 a.m. Pacific. The Dragon Endurance vehicle is now on board our recovery vessel Megan in the Gulf, just off the coast of Florida near Pensacola, and we're now awaiting the egress or the exit of our 4 CREW-7 members, and this will be assisted out onto the recovery deck.
And the recovery vessel is actually named after NASA astronaut Megan McArthur. She flew on board CREW-2. That was my first space launch I ever got to see in person, so really special to get to see her launch. She also flew on board STS-125. So great to see CREW-7 back on board Megan's namesake. We are expecting egress here in just a couple minutes. They are working to install that safety equipment around the hatch as well as remove the footrests. And so we typically will either see the commander or the pilot egress or get out of their seats first, and that's just due to the proximity of their location to the hatch. Usually it's a little easier to get one of those two out ahead of the mission specialists on either side.
Now you mentioned the namesake for Megan. Of course, the Atlantic recovery vessel is named after Shannon Walker, who flew on the NASA CREW-1 mission. So we named these recovery vessels after our first 2 female astronauts to fly in our Dragon capsules. So I love the tribute there that we have paid to these incredible women that have taken part in spaceflight here at SpaceX.
So as they continue to step through those procedures, again, just a reminder, we do expect the crew to be assisted out of the vehicle, as well as be assisted in standing up and getting rolled away in order for those initial medical checks. This is standard for all long-duration space flights. And they'll jump right into their post-flight reconditioning period that begins on splashdown day, and it lasts for about 45 days to help return crew members to their pre-flight condition. Like we've mentioned, they do exercise while on board the International Space Station for a couple hours a day, and that does help maintain some bone and muscle mass and prevent that loss. But because of the microgravity environment of the International Space Station, there is still a recovery period that takes place. And again, that's about a 45-day period to just get them back to pre-flight condition.
Now, immediately after they egress from the capsule, they will be transported back into, excuse me, one of the medical bays that are on board the recovery vessel, where they will be seen by the flight surgeon for a preliminary medical checkup immediately after egressing.
It looks like we are going to have our very first views of
Estamos aí então
egress here.
aguardando a saída da Jasmin.
I think that may have been Andy.
Ou Andy.
This is Andy's second space flight. He's from the European Space Agency.
É isso aí, a saída então do Andy, do Andreas Mogensen.
And
Então é o
Andy
primeiro a
Mogensen
deixar
now
a cápsula
CREW-7
Dragon.
capsule. And you see he is getting assisted there. That is
É o
completely
astronauta
normal,
da
and as
NASA,
expected,
então
this
aí
will take
da
place
ESA,
for
né?
all
O
4 crew members.
Andreas
Yeah, this is standard procedure
Mogensen.
when we egress the NASA astronauts from Dragon. We assist them into it's not quite a wheelchair.
Então primeiro
it's
a
not
deixar
quite
então aí a cápsula Dragon.
well, I can't think of I can't think of the word for it. Not a gurney, but we roll them back into the medical bay, and this just helps ensure their safety because sometimes, even though we had amazing recovery conditions tonight, it's not always the case. Sometimes we can get wave height of a couple feet,
Segundo
which
deixar a
could make for
cápsula
an
Dragon,
unstable vessel. So
a nossa
regardless of
comandante,
the sea conditions, we always assist the
Jasmin.
crew in getting
Jasmin,
out
será?
of the capsule and making their way back to the medical bay.
We did see some thumbs up and some cheers for Andy Mogensen as he egressed the capsule. Next up is going to be the commander of CREW-7. That's NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli. This is her first space flight.
What an experience it must be, this first time of feeling gravity for really kind of the first time, because if you're born into it and you don't really know what it's like to not feel it,
Não é a Jasmin
I
ainda.
imagine it would be quite an experience to feel it and really feel it for, at this magnitude for the first time.
And some waves there from NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli.
É a Jasmin.
So next up out of the capsule will be the two mission specialists,
Então
Konstantin
vimos aí a
Borisov
saída da
from
Jasmin Moghbeli,
Roscosmos, as well as
Astronauta
Satoshi
da NASA.
Furukawa from the Japan
Próximo então a
Aerospace
sair
Exploration
será
Agency.
então o astronauta da JAXA, Satoshi Furukawa.
So if you're just joining us, CREW-7 splashdown off the coast of Florida at 2:47 a.m. Pacific. We have had two crew members already egress or exit the capsule. That was European Space Agency astronaut Andy Mogensen, as well as NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli. And there's two more astronauts on board, and we're working through those egress procedures, everything going really smoothly. Following this, the crew will fly back to shore via helicopter, and then they will fly by plane back to Houston, and from there they will go to their respective countries. Again, as we mentioned, this is the very first space flight where every single seat was occupied by a member of a different space agency. We are seeing on our screen there another one of the footrests as it is removed, just to give the crew the
Estamos
recovery
aguardando a saída
crew,
do
rather, a
Satoshi
little more
Furukawa.
space in order to help get the crew out.
7h39 pelo horário de Brasília.
As we mentioned, 2 of the 4 have already egressed. Excuse me, we already have Commander Jasmin Moghbeli and pilot Andreas Mogensen. They've already exited. We now have Konstantin Borisov and Satoshi Furukawa still on board. Excuse me, it's early or late.
Furukawa.
Thank you, Furukawa. Still on board the Dragon capsule. And we should see one of them egress here just momentarily.
Quem é que tá saindo agora?
And it looks like they're beginning to egress now.
Vamos ver.
I
7h40
believe this
minutos.
is Konstantin Borisov of Roscosmos, his first space flight.
Então quem tá saindo agora é o Cosmonauta Russo, Konstantin Borisov.
And Konstantin Borisov has successfully egressed. Some handshakes there, it looks like.
Thumbs up and happy waves.
Yep.
E por fim, vamos ver então a
So the
saída do
remaining
segundo do
CREW-7 crew
especialista da
member
missão.
inside
Aí
Dragon
o
is
Satoshi
JAXA,
Furukawa,
Japan Aerospace
Astronauta da
Exploration
JAXA.
Agency astronaut Satoshi Furukawa. Again, this is his second space flight.
E assim que ele sair, vamos encerrar então a nossa transmissão. Agradecendo então aí a todos pela companhia nesta manhã de hoje, 12 de março de 2023. Lembrando que logo mais, então, a partir das 10h25, missão com a Rocket Lab All Night Long. Daqui a pouquinho.
And so Satoshi Furukawa actually has the most time spent in space of Crew-7. He's logged a total of 366 days in space over 2 flights.
E lembrando que logo mais à noite, então,
So just a little
colocarei
over a
tudo para
year in
vocês,
space and all.
o resumo do que aconteceu tudo ao longo do dia, tá? Não se preocupem. Então temos aí a saída então do Satoshi Furukawa. O último então a deixar aí a cápsula Dragon.
Once again, this is standard procedure for assisting all the crew members into the medical bays.
Então aí temos a saída então do Satoshi Furukawa, Astronauta da
And Satoshi
JAXA.
Furukawa, the last member of Crew-7, now out of the vehicle.
So I
E
just
assim
did
estaremos.
a bit of math. Now that we have
E assim
officially
estamos
egressed
encerrando a
all
nossa
4
transmissão
crew
no
members,
canal Will PTV,
we had
agradecendo
an
então a todos
on-time
pela audiência, pela
splashdown
companhia.
at 2:47
Nos
a.m.
vemos
Pacific.
então daqui a pouquinho.
We lifted the capsule onto the recovery vessel at 3:14 a.m. So that
Vemos
was
então
a
a partir
total
das
of
10h25
27
para a
minutes
missão da Rocket
for
Lab
recovery
All Night
operations.
Long.
And then it was from 3:14 a.m. to 3:42 a.m. when we completed egress, another 28 minutes. So it basically took just as long to lift them out of the water as it